across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You bet, yes. Welcome along. It is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia Hartley-Bush. She's back, of course, tomorrow. Busy one today. Labour preparing to unveil that plan to overhaul the welfare systems. Over 1 million foreign nationals are revealed to be claiming benefits. And 4 in 10 Gen Zers consider quitting their jobs to live off government support. We've lost our way. We've lost our anchor. We've lost focus. We'll have more on that in a few moments' time. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage insists his dispute with suspended MP Rupert Lowe has not slowed Reform UK's progress, announcing that 29 councillors have defected to the party to stand for May's local elections. The significance of that we'll look at throughout the course of the programme as well. And the number of asylum seekers waiting for appeals has increased by nearly 500% in 2 years to 42,000, slowing removals, raising taxpayers' costs and delaying efforts to move migrants out of those hotels. It's an incredibly costly affair, don't you know? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. And just when you start to look for one story involving for what frankly has to be an economic crime scene, a whole bunch of them seem to show up together. I'm referring to the world of welfare and benefits. And this one really jumped out at me, I'm sure, like you as well. Benefits are being claimed by over 1 million foreign nationals. This is official analysis of government figures. Over 1 million foreign nationals. And you have to, I heard somebody elsewhere today kind of dancing around the word foreign nationals, as if you sort of say that out loud, it makes you some kind of like little bit of a weirdo, bit of a supremacist, maybe. He's dissing the foreign nationals. It's not about dissing any individual. It's about looking at how this country balances its books for its people. I mean, I think it's as simple as straightforward as that. Households with at least one foreign national claimant received more than, are you ready for this figure? 7.5 billion in universal credit in 2023. 7.5 billion. These aren't the figures from some bloke on Twitter who made it up. This is the official figures from the Department for Work and Pensions. Foreign nationals become eligible for universal credit and other benefits on the same terms as Brits once they are granted indefinite leave to remain and have settled or refugee status. That's the official definition of this. If they paid national insurance for a decade or more, they're also entitled to state pension. Well, if you're paying national insurance, it may be that you've come here from another country, you've settled, you've assimilated, and you now, are considered to be a citizen of this country, and you're paying national insurance every single week. Therefore, one assumes you're paying your taxes every single week as well. I don't have a problem with that. That's absolutely fine. So there's that story. But here's the bad news. The cost of foreign benefit claimants, excluding a further 5.4 billion for accommodating and supporting the backlog of more than 100,000 asylum seekers. The cost rose fivefold in 5 years under the last Conservative government, and it's likely to rise further as 800,000 foreign nationals are expected to receive indefinite leave to remain in the UK over the next decade. This is following record levels of net migration of up to around about 906,000 a year. I'm sorry to throw all these figures at you. There's plenty of them. The analysis on all of this by the Centre for Migration Control suggests 40 nationalities, after getting indefinite leave to remain, settled status or refugee protection, are claiming benefits at a greater rate per head of population than British citizens. Is that significant? Of course it's significant. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. The argument usually goes, if somebody is coming from from another country to settle in this country and they're contributing over and above, which I think is a reasonable criteria for somebody to come here, then you go, okay, I get it. He's a rocket scientist. He's a head engineer, works at British Aerospace, designs stuff, makes things, invents bits. Yeah, I get that. Earning a six-figure salary, paying into the kitty, all works fine. But if you've got 906,000 people a year who are likely to be given indefinite leave to remain, and you look at the kind of citizens versus non-citizens argument, you have to scratch your head and say, what sort of mad upside-down world are we living in? So 3 nationalities, Congolese, Iraqis and Afghans, are claiming benefits at 4 times the rate of British people. So something is terribly wrong here. I don't think we're talking here all about Afghan interpreters who did us a massive favour during various wars and worked alongside us. I mean, I get that. Doors are open in that respect. But I don't believe we are. Iraqis, Congolese and Afghans, 4 times likely to be claiming benefits than British people. Now, we know that tomorrow Rachel Reeves is looking at slashing the tyres of the welfare bill. Some are suggesting she's going to slash the tyres of the wheelchair tomorrow, because this is, of course, lots of very unpopular decisions could be made. She's looking in the wrong direction, frankly, because we also have this story. A generation of young people risk languishing on benefits after 1 in 4 said they had considered quitting the workforce. A quarter have said they considered quitting the workforce. We know there's an issue with poor mental health. That's the most frequent reason given by under 25s wanting to drop out of employment. Now, I genuinely have an issue with this, and of course add that to the story of Wes Streeting, the health secretary, only yesterday saying we're over-diagnosing mental health. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that he's right about that. I want to be the first in line to say if you've got a mental health problem, an issue that for years was ignored and undiagnosed and goodness knows what else, I would be the first to endorse your claim for that. But the scope for what defines a mental health issue is as wide as the scope that used to define what a bad back was. I mean, if you've genuinely got a bad back, Eamon Holmes has a bad back, you know, that's bad stuff. You can't really walk, you can't move, then that's a bad back. If you've got a twinge, that ain't a bad back. If you're feeling a little bit anxious, that ain't a mental health condition. But I can understand there's going to be thousands of people who think it is. The numbers involved in this story, it's not just a few bucks here and there, it's multiple billions. You know, Labour talk about the black hole, goodness me. The black hole, the 22 billion black hole. They could have filled this thing 9 times over in the last 7 months since they've been in office. Just explain, what reform should there be of the welfare system? What reform would you like to see? Is there anyone, I know there's going to be, every time you read out a story, as we did at the beginning here, where you've got at least 1 million foreign nationals claiming benefits in this country, I'm absolutely sure that among that million is going to be some legitimate stories that are very different from, you know, it's not about somebody jumping on a boat and going, I'm going to stick my feet up in a hammock in Peterborough, do naff for the rest of my life and just trouser a few quid courtesy of the taxpayer. There's going to be genuine cases here, and there's going to be people who found themselves in this bit. But the reality is we've got 1 million foreign nationals claiming benefits to the tune of £7.5 billion. That is wrong, right? OK, that's just demonstrably wrong. Nobody's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I think you'll find actually that that's actually perfectly acceptable. It's clearly not acceptable. And it comes back to the whole argument we keep having about Donald Trump. I've had no time really at all for Donald Trump over the years. But I totally understand why people voted for him. And if you look at what he's trying to do with immigration, I mean, there's some big headlines at the moment, see El Salvador for details. Whether he keeps up the momentum on that is really where the evidence will be. But certainly that intent on, you know, we're as mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. 0344 499 1000. How would you modify or reform the welfare system? Our lines are open. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Theo Usherwood, political commentator, is back with us. Theo, good afternoon to you.
A very good afternoon to you, Ian.
Always
Great
good.
to be with you.
Oh, and nice to have you with us again. So these figures, 7.5 billion in universal credit claimed by households with at least one foreign national. This is 2023 figures that we've got, calling for more reforms for the benefit system. Let's have a listen to Chancellor Rachel Reeves speaking earlier this month on this very issue.
We know that the welfare system is not working. It's not working for taxpayers, it's not working for our economy, and it's not working for people on benefits who are stuck on those benefits rather than being given the support to get back into meaningful work. Everyone who can work should be working, and this government is determined to provide the support as well as reform the welfare system to ensure that work always pays.
That work always pays, and here's the problem. I mean, it's a soundbite that every politician has used, Theo, forever, isn't it? We've got to ensure that work pays. Brown said it, Blair said it, Cameron said it, Thatcher probably said it, Major doubtless said it. They all say it. What does it actually mean?
Well, look, just to pick up on that £7.5 billion figure, which of course is being paid to foreign nationals in 2023, many of your viewers, listeners will rightly argue, well, how can we allow that to happen at the same time slash benefits for most vulnerable, for the disabled? And that 7.5 billion, first to say, that's a huge figure, but it is not as high as the incapacity sickness benefits bill, which was around 23 billion before the pandemic, and on current projections, it's due to hit 70 billion by 2030. So it's already, it's going to be around 10 times what that foreign national bill is in 5 years' time. So that's why they're looking at the bigger portion of the benefits pie, and that's why the government wants to cut that rather than slash that 7.5 billion. The other particular issue is, Ian, that when you come to this country, and the government wants to, of course, ensure that the backlog of those travelling across the English Channel, arriving in this country, and then we've got to, it was in more than 100,000. They need to get that down. Of course, those are people that are costing this country £8 million a day in hotel bills. In order to do that, yes, you can deport many of those, but some of them, under the current criteria, will be able to successfully apply for refugee status. And according to the Refugee Council, by current estimations, that was around 60 to 70,000 as of last year. So those people, as the government looks to clear that backlog and reduce that hotel bill, yes, it can do that, but it has to accept that whilst they will be successful in deporting many people back to their countries of origin, they will have to accept that many of those individuals will be allowed to stay in this country. And that the point at which they're allowed to stay in this country, they get refugee status, and they'll ultimately get indefinite leave to remain, but they will remain foreign nationals. They will then be able to work. But of course, universal credit, which is the main form of benefit in this country, 40% of those on universal credit, their wages aren't high enough in order to sustain their lives, and therefore they have their wages topped up by universal credit, and therefore they will be a benefit claimant. And that's why we end up with the bill. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's right.
No, that is. You're absolutely right. It's the official explanation.
I'm trying to explain to you why it's happening, and it will drive many people on this radio station completely potty to think, well, hang on a moment, the government wants to slash benefits for the most vulnerable, but at the same time, we're handing out a bill running more than £7 billion for foreign nationals.
Somebody somewhere, there's a very real sense, there's a real appetite out there at the moment, and certainly when Rachel Reeves, I noticed one poll saying that, that Rachel, the thing Rachel Reeves has on her side, because it'd be a bit of a rebellion from Labour MPs, Diane Abbott. If Diane Abbott stands up and says this is a terrible thing, then the chances are it's a very good thing. Just whatever she says, just think the very opposite to that. But nonetheless, the people really on the side of the Chancellor are the public. I think most members of the public, most people, there's lots of polls bearing this out, are saying this madness needs to stop. And there's an appetite for a leader that would say, this has all got to stop. I mean, the numbers we talk about, when we were talking about individuals, hundreds of thousands of people, billions of pounds in money, all manner of extraordinary statistics. And this is all coming out of hard-working taxpayers' money. I mean, there's no magic, to coin the phrase, no magic money tree. I mean, it's insane. We're in an upside-down world, Theo.
But this is the reason why the country isn't working. I mean, fundamentally, you've got not enough people out there working, paying taxes, contributing to a pot that can go into the Treasury, which they can then, pay for the most vulnerable who need our support. The pot of the most vulnerable who need our support has got too large. And that's why we find ourselves in the trouble that we find ourselves in economically. And that's what the Chancellor wants to ultimately fix. But the question is, and this is the question that Labour MPs are asking, is, OK, well, you can cut the benefits for those individuals, but you're going to end up in a situation where those are individuals, these are disabled people who can't ultimately work, and you're just going to impoverish them.
Yeah.
You come to the question about a rebellion. It's worth mentioning now that actually the changes that the government are looking at won't trigger a rebellion. They'll just trigger lots of Labour MPs coming onto the radio stations and television studios and shouting off and saying how terrible it is, because what the government's actually looking at doing is not going to freeze the PIP payments, but what it's going to do is it's going to change the criteria. If it was to freeze the PIP payments, that would require a vote in the House of Commons, and then you'd end up with a rebellion. But by changing the criteria, they can do that without necessarily going to a vote in the House of Commons. So what they're going to do is, in broad terms, when it comes to incapacity disability benefits, how those are determined is you notch up points, and the more points you get, the more benefits you get. And so when you can't do something, you are entitled to so many points. And when you fill in the form, those points add up to a certain number of benefits. So if you can't wash yourself, then you get a certain number of points. If you can't cook for yourself, then you get a certain number of points.
Yeah.
And what the government's looking at doing is changing those criteria, so actually it's harder to get the higher number of points and therefore claim the greater amount of benefits. And they can do that without going to a vote in the House of Commons. So Diana Abbott, John McDonnell, all of those Labour left-wing MPs, they're not going to get a say in this when it comes to a vote in the Commons, and therefore there ultimately won't be a big rebellion.
Then they're not as such changing the law, right? They are changing elements of the criteria, etc., which, as you rightly say, clever stuff, but it's just how it works. Theo, stay with us. We're going to talk about Nigel Farage's latest announcement as well of those defectors. Trump and Putin set to have a phone call tomorrow as well. Here's a great point from a mate of mine called Andrew. I won't give any other details, who says it might be amusing to your listeners to compare the benefit figure for foreign nationals with the yearly inheritance tax take. That's such a good point. I bet you if you added it up, you'd discover a sort of spooky synergy between those two numbers. Or look, people who've worked hard all their life and passed some money down to their kids to assist them so they don't have to sponge off the state is going to be taken by the state and given to people who are sponging off the stuff. I mean, you can't make this nonsense up. When does the madness stop? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Well, on the face of it, it doesn't seem so, Julia. And I think when you listen to what Putin has been saying in the last few years and the last few weeks, you come to that conclusion as well. And Western intelligence agencies, as I understand it, believe that Putin himself believes he can still win. And his two main aims were to subjugate Ukraine completely back into Russia and to decouple the US from Europe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There's already some incredible messages coming through. I'll get through as many of those as we possibly can shortly. Theo Usherwood is with us. We're digesting, chewing over the fat of the big stories of the day, and this one happened in the last hour or so. Theo, Nigel Farage insisting his dispute with suspended PM Rupert Lowe, MP Rupert Lowe, it's not quite PM yet, Rupert Lowe, has not slowed Reform UK's progress. Today he's announced that 29 councillors have defected to stand for the party in May's local elections. Let's have a listen to what the Reform leader said an hour ago.
One of the things that we lack in Reform is experience. A lot of our people that have become part of the 400 branches that we've set up that Zia mentioned, a lot of them have never been in politics before. We need some old lags. We need some people who've been in council and know what they're doing. And that's why today I'm delighted.
Well, cut off slightly at his prime there, but when he said old lags, Theo, isn't an old lag a criminal?
I think he was referring. I'm just actually speaking from next door to where that press conference was held. I've been here in central London, the Royal Horse Guards Hotel, rather grand settings for Nigel Farage announcing 29 defections from various parties. What's interesting about this, actually, Ian, is that those defections have come from a number of independent parties, from Labour, from the Conservatives, even a Liberal Democrat has switched sides to Reform UK ahead of the local elections. And Nigel Farage, rather proud of the fact that there's such a broad swathe, broad church of people who've decided to come on board after a very difficult couple of weeks for his party. I was speaking to both James Murdoch, the MP down in Thurrock, who of course won that seat unexpectedly at the general election. He was telling me that, well, would Rupert Lowe be able to come back? It was a question of never say never. You got the feeling from speaking to James Murdoch that actually he was quite fond of Rupert Lowe and would hope that there could be some sort of reconciliation. But then when I spoke to Lee Anderson, the MP up at Ashfield, he was like, nobody's ever heard of Rupert Lowe. Nobody in my constituency knows who he is. Everybody knows who Nigel Farage is. Forget Rupert Lowe. Sort of, well, he didn't say that, but it was sort of like Rupert Lowe's in the past. He's a has-been, and this is all about Nigel Farage now and leading Reform both in the local elections and then looking ahead to the general election, trying to put the whole sorry mess of the last couple of weeks behind them. So there's obviously, it's not a united front in Reform. It still continues to cause ructions and tensions within the party. And the question for Farage is, of course, is, can he get past this? And I think what's interesting about particularly the Rupert Lowe fiascos, it's very different from what happened with Ben Habib. It's very different to what happened with Suzanne Evans. This time, Rupert Lowe really does seem to have had support or has support amongst grassroots Reform members. We saw there was a dip in the membership. There's a lot of support for him online. Rupert Lowe obviously was touted by Elon Musk, the boss at X, as having, his support for Tommy Robinson was seen as giving him real credentials to lead Reform and become Prime Minister, rather than Nigel Farage, who only at the end of last year was looking at so close to Mr. Musk and possibly securing a huge donation from the boss of X. So there is a feeling that, you know, we could have attended this press conference 3 weeks ago and reform would have been seen as the, you know, riding high at the crest of a wave and taking on Labour and the Conservatives in these local elections, and nothing was going to knock them off task. But the brand has certainly been hit a little bit by what's happened with Mr. Lowe and the falling out.
Yeah. And I don't know whether announcing 29 councillors are crossing the line is quite enough to kind of, I mean, there were lots of rumours that the chairman was going to be fired and all sorts of other things. And wow, this is going to be huge. This will mean, you know, and Rupert Lowe is going to come back in suddenly, messianic enter stage left, and none of that happened. They introduced a bunch of councillors, and I'm not sure that's necessarily going to address the damage you just outlined.
No, there's no way back for Rupert Lowe. Clearly, you can't. Nigel Farage can't have Rupert Lowe in the party. You know, I've known Nigel Farage now for more than 10 years. I've worked with him at the other place. He only works when he's running the show and he's in complete charge. He doesn't play nicely with others. He needs to be in complete and utter control. And you'd think certainly in government, in opposition, you need to be able to build a strong team and delegate. But Nigel Farage, look, to give him his due, he's got to where he's got to, riding, you know, approaching 30% in the polls, doing it his way. And he clearly doesn't see that there is any merit or benefit to changing his way of operating. And he knows that if he was to cede control to Rupert Lowe, that ultimately that would be his downfall. This is the house that he built, and Indeed. He's going to live in it.
Just a final one. We'll have to be brief on this one, Theo. Keir Starmer has spoken on the prospects of a Ukraine ceasefire as hopes rise for a deal. This is ahead of the Trump-Putin talks tomorrow. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer on this issue.
President Zelensky has shown once again, and beyond any doubt, that Ukraine is the party of peace. Vladimir has committed to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, but Putin is trying to delay, saying there must be a painstaking study before a ceasefire can take place. Well, the world needs action, not a study, not empty words and conditions. So my message is very clear. Sooner or later, Putin will have to come to the table. So this is the moment. Let the guns fall silent. Let the barbaric attacks on Ukraine once and for all stop, and agree to a ceasefire now.
I don't know whether the Kremlin will be taking much notice of this, Theo. I say this respectfully to Mr. Starmer. I don't think his view is that considered, is it, in terms of what's happening in Red Square?
No, I think, you know, Keir Starmer's there promising, you know, what he didn't say explicitly, as we've said to others, 10,000 troops, support for President Zelensky. But ultimately, this is a deal that's going to be done between America, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And Zelensky has said that he's on board with it because he recognises that he doesn't have any other choice. Yeah. And Keir Starmer might say that he wants to put 10,000 troops on the ground, but, you know, Putin has said, and Sergei Lavrov, his foreign minister, have said that is absolutely not going to happen in any peace agreement that they're going to sign up to. So from Keir Starmer's point of view, he can make these promises. Number 10 can put forward these grand plans, but they know there's something always in the back of their mind, of course, that they know that there's very, very small chance that they're actually going to have to enact upon them. The big question for the likes of Britain, the big question for the likes of France and the rest of Europe is, can they actually now get together and stump up the cash to bolster Britain's defences? Because ultimately, nobody is going to bet against Vladimir Putin coming back in a couple of years' time, either for Ukraine or for another country which it borders. And can the coalition of the willing at that point actually put up a robust defence to Putin with or without, it's most likely to be without, the support of America? Listen,
Theo, thorough stuff as ever. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the reform conference, if that's what you want to call it. It's not really a conference, it was an announcement, but there's plenty of faces still to chat to. He is live from there. That's Theo Usherwood, political correspondent, with us on the programme. Over to you. We'll go back to the benefit story as well. We threw out the most obvious of questions, so I think the answer is a little more tricky. What reforms should there be to the welfare system or the benefit system? What are your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Loads of comments coming in from you. This one from George, who says, I've got a great example of the benefit frauds, or someone using PIP payments for things that he shouldn't be using them for. I work for a quad and bike company delivering and dropping off quad bikes to customers. A customer had an issue with one of their quad bikes, so I picked it up to take it back to the warehouse for repair. The customer openly told me that they were really upset that the quad bike wasn't working because they used their PIP money to pay for it. Now, I'm sure you sort of have to laugh a little bit, because otherwise you would go nuts. Wasn't there the woman I clocked this week that was claiming her benefit system from Thailand? She moved to Thailand or something, living a life out there, but still claim. I can't make head and tail of this. Look, I don't for 1 second, let me just be clear about this. The average person who has to use the welfare system does it because they have to use the welfare system. But the contingent of people that don't or shouldn't is sizable and massively expensive. And we now know we've got over 1 million foreign nationals claiming benefits, costing the taxpayer in this country £7.5 billion. I mean, that's a third of Rachel Reeves' alleged black hole, right? This is according to government figures. These are DWP figures, not made up by some bloke on Twitter. This comes as Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to reveal his plans to reform incapacity benefits, as over 7 million Brits now rely on sickness support. That's up by a third in 5 years. And you know what? That picture is getting progressively worse. Alarmingly, 1 in 4 young people are said to be considering quitting the workforce entirely to live on benefits. Just don't want to go to work, just fed up with it. I feel a bit stressed, a bit anxious. Yeah, it's not a mental health condition just because you feel a bit anxious. That's called life. It's going to be full of those ups and downs. You thought you were going to live a life free of any kind of anxiety or a moment of stress or even a moment where life feels a bit tough. No, that is literally what life is, all right? It's no one-way street of positivity living as a human being on planet Earth. It's never existed like that. It never will do. Let's speak to Sun columnist Ross Clark on this confusing picture. Good afternoon to you, Ross. I was saying a little earlier, I mean, whatever people say about Donald Trump, you know, America spotted all sorts of these curious, you know, money being wasted in area, immigration not being addressed, net zero becoming a religion. And they had a thirst and an appetite for someone to come in and say, I'm as mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore, I'm sorting this nonsense out. Now, it's early days for Donald Trump. The initial signs are good if you're a Trump supporter. He's doing what he said he would do. It's something like we're living in an upside-down world. We kind of need not just a tinkering on this, we need a seismic overhaul of how we do welfare in this country. Would that be fair?
Yes. I mean, the tragedy is that the Conservative Lib Dem coalition between 2010 and 2015 did actually tackle benefits spending, and the benefits bill fell. The number of people on benefits fell steadily, out of work benefits, disability benefits. You know, the big promise was going to be we were going to make work pay. But then something strange happened about 2016, 2017, before the pandemic, by the way. Numbers started to creep up again, and the Tories just completely lost any control of benefit spending. And Labour, as we know, hasn't really done very much in its first 9 months to change that. I mean, clearly now Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves and Wes Streeting and also Liz Kendall, put in a word for her, they do understand that this benefits bill is absolutely out of control. You know, besides the no doubt genuine claimants, there are people just completely taking the mickey, as you intimated with your guy with the with his whatever it was. But you know, we all have those tales. I mean, a few years ago, I was handling throwing the welly competition at the village fair, and this one guy came along and chucked it 10 meters further than anybody else and did it every year. And I ended up asking, well, what do you do for a living? You must be, you know, do you sort of got some job which builds up your muscles? And he said, oh no, actually I'm out of work, I've got ME, I'm signed off on the sick. And you saw completely ridiculous.
The SE Wellywanger.
Yeah, people taking the mickey in this way. But the trouble is, while Keir Starmer and so on seem to understand this and seem to have an appetite now for reforming the system, the Labour MPs, who of course they require to get through their legislation through the Commons, there's far too many of them seem to think it is an outrage ever to cut somebody's benefits. You know, they have this sort of emotional sort of attachment to the benefit system, and they will never ever vote for any kind of benefit to be cut, however much the evidence is presented to them that you know, it's being claimed unfairly.
And I was looking at these numbers. I mean, certainly if you look at foreign nationals, and I know the left-wing meerkats sort of bob their heads up at this point and go, he's talking about foreigners, this is going to be a very ugly conversation. I mean, this is just a reality. We're all adults in the room. We should be able to have these challenging chats. But 800,000 foreign nationals are expected to receive indefinite leave to remain. This is on top of what we've already got. Now, I don't know, firstly, I don't know why 800,000, nearly 1 million people would be given indefinite leave to remain. That seems extraordinary to me. But let's assume every one of them is, you know, a legitimate case and there's nothing we can do about it. And there's 800,000 people going to be added to the list. I mean, I don't imagine they're all rocket scientists. I don't imagine these are people that are going to be earning six-figure salaries anytime soon. They're likely to be in lower-paid jobs, and those lower-paid jobs, of course, require some kind of top-up to them. Hence the universal credit system kicks in. So they might be working, which is always the argument that's thrown back at you. Oh, no, these are people that are working. They're not spongers. They're working. It's like, well, yeah, but the point is should these people be here in the first place if their disposition is so bad that they cannot find themselves in a job that doesn't require topping up by the taxpayer?
Yeah, well, I mean, the government was trying to address this, wasn't it? I mean, when we left the European Union, we said we were going to have control over our migration system again. We're going to let in the rocket scientists, but we weren't going to let in the benefit claimants. And the previous government set this minimum salary threshold for anybody who wanted to come to Britain. It was then raised, but then, you know, that becomes irrelevant when it comes to things like asylum cases, where I mean, you don't need any income or potential to earn any income to, you know, be able to remain in the country under asylum laws. And, you know, we have sort of Albanian gangsters, don't we, who just claim the right to stay in Britain under the, you know, they would infringe their right to a family life if we deported them. And so we've got this sort of whole underclass of people who are, you know, well under the sort of salary threshold that the government set, and you know, they end up on benefits, and we all end up paying for that.
Or maybe though, to tie in the other story, Ross, maybe these people are doing, you know, although they might be minimum wage jobs, they're the jobs that some of our youngsters aren't doing, because we learned today that poor mental health was the reason why young people risk languishing on benefits, with an extraordinary stat of how many are dropping out of work. And I mean, if you're seeing a situation where you've got over a million, where you've got youngsters who are opting not to work because it's too stressful, and you've got a quarter of them doing that, a quarter, I mean, we've got a problem.
Well, I think the pandemic seems to have changed fundamental attitudes to work among many people. You know, maybe spent months off work in 2020, lockdown, being paid furlough and so on. So this is rather nice. Just get paid to sit at home and watch Netflix and so on. And you know, come the end of the pandemic, didn't want to go back to work. And you know, it's this absurd situation now where you get a quarter of 18, 24-year-olds say don't want to work, and employers are then you know, desperate for employees, and end up importing migrant labour to fill the jobs which should be filled by British people. And I mean, the benefit system here is utterly wrong. What we need is a system where you don't just hand out money to people to do nothing. You demand they turn up somewhere and do some work, otherwise they do not get any money. And the John Major's government actually did a trial of this back in about 1996 in Humberside and Kent. One sort of two groups of people on benefits were told, you know, you're not going to get any money unless you turn up for a compulsory work placement. And you know what? About a sort of third of the benefit claimants on those trials, they just stopped claiming. And you ask why? You know, probably they had jobs. They might not have been living in Britain. They might not have existed at all. And if we get, you know, we can return to that kind of experiment. Of course, you know, Tony Blair then got elected and the momentum was lost. But, you know, if we can repeat that sort of trial and have that sort of system where you don't get money unless you actually turn up somewhere and do some work, you know, we unless we get that, then the benefit system's just going to continue to mushroom.
Absolutely spot on. Listen, Ross, thank you very much indeed for that. And I really do resent the idea. That's Ross Clark, by the way. Sun columnist, always got big opinions on these things. And what he just said there at the end, I mean, why would that be controversial? Why would that upset Diane Abbott? Why would anybody on the left, or even some on the right for that matter, say, well, you can't say stuff like that? You know, we often hear these stats that, well, you know, if you tinker around the edge, it doesn't really save that much money. Doesn't save that much money. Let me give you those figures again. These are foreign nationals claiming universal credit in this country. 7.5 billion people, billion pounds, 7.5 billion that we know of. That's likely to increase because there's going to be 800,000 foreign nationals who are expected to receive indefinite leave to remain in the UK over the next decade. So seriously, we're expected to believe there's 800,000 people who are escaping tyranny that need protection in this country, and therefore we're going to look after those people, and if that means topping up their wages because they'll be in low-paid jobs, then so be it. And I was thinking back to that programme which was called Go Back to Where You Came From, which featured Chloe Dobbs, one of our regular contributors, which was sort of a kind of I don't know, sort of an experiment of sending people with certain political beliefs to areas like Syria where people do make that journey to come to the UK and elsewhere, and to sort of try and put yourself in their shoes, as it were. And it was quite fascinating. I didn't see all of it, but the bits I saw were fascinating. And some of the people that they spoke to weren't coming to sponge. They weren't. That wasn't their intention, to sponge. One fella said he back in was it? I think it was Syria. He sold mobile phones for a living, so he wants to come to the UK and do the same thing. He's a perfectly honest guy. His name was Mohammed. He had no intention of sponging off the probably didn't even know about the welfare system. Okay, he'd escaped a terrible country. That in itself is not a reason to give somebody asylum, but it might be. But generally speaking, just because you don't like your government isn't a reason. Used to flog mobile phones, so essentially worked in car phone warehouse in Syria, if you like, and wanted to do similar when he came to the UK. Now there's a great example of a guy who will probably need a top up on his money. So if he makes his claim, says, hi, I've crossed over on a boat, I've come from Syria, it's a hellhole over there at the moment, I don't dispute any of that, whether his specific circumstances are enough to fit the bill, but even if they did, he would be given a top-up because he wouldn't have enough money to live on. Now, that is wrong. Why can we not call that out as being wrong? That is not what an asylum system is meant to do. It's not meant to be a la carte. We're not meant to be in a position where we are part of a choice that people could go to France, might go to Germany, Spain, see how it goes, because I want to change my life. I get it. I'd probably do the same if I was living in Syria or Eritrea or Iran or any of those godforsaken places where, I get it, life is a bit challenging. It's not a reason to claim asylum. And if you do try to claim it, the idea that you're then topped up with benefits is frankly obscene. It's an obscenity. This is other people's money. This is other people's money. 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. This is Talk.
I was really struck by your conversation immediately before the break with Ben from Lincolnshire, who said at one stage, this is, I think, not recent, he was getting £3,000 a month. And he said that was £1,000 more from from various sorts of benefit than he would get if he worked. He didn't want it, quite rightly. He wanted to work because it gave dignity. But if you have a benefit system that encourages people to remain dependent on the state when they could work, that's a bad system.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 10 to 2. Let's go to your calls. John is in York. How you doing, John?
Not bad, mate. I'll be better.
What's going on?
Right, Pip, I do agree with they need to change things. Now, I'm on Pip. I get mobility. But there's a load of catalogue of things wrong with it. First thing, if you ring up Pip on the number, the first thing you get asked is, do you want to speak to someone in English?
Right, that's interesting.
With respect, it should go straight to English, and then it should be, you know, if you need a translator after that.
You might think so.
I don't think so. It should be, shouldn't it? Full stop.
Yeah.
Secondly, the assessors. The assessors haven't got a clue. Now, I had a stroke in 2010 and I lost partial vision. Hence the reason, even though I've got mobility, I'm not allowed to drive. When I went for an assessment, because I started claiming for this PIP 3 years ago, I was told that I should go and get a pair of glasses. Now, with respect, I think most people know that a stroke is brain damage.
Yeah.
Yeah? So why would a pair of glasses actually help my brain to see if I've got brain damage?
It's a very good point, yeah. I mean, it's not... that'd be an optical illusion, wouldn't it? That'd be magic.
This is a professional person that's assessing people. So like you say, now, not being funny, mate, I worked all my life. I had my own business. I employed people. I paid all my taxes. 3 years ago, suddenly catalogue of, you know, illnesses. I'm waiting for an heart valve transplant as well at the moment, or a new heart valve.
Okay.
Now, the sad thing is yeah, I have to be on PIP. I can't work, full stop. But even when I first started, I got the basic payment. I had to go to court to get the uplift to the mobility. I literally, not personally actually physically appear at court.
You had to go through a legal hearing. What does that mean, mobility?
Right, basically you get a standard amount, and then the mobility uplifts you a bit more money, which basically we get the car.
Okay.
Now, obviously my wife, she works 24/7, but she has to drive me around. I live in the middle of nowhere. I haven't even got a bus service. We've not even got a shop where I live. So, you know, it is a little bit awkward, and she has to run me around when she's not working 24/7, obviously paying her bills. Yeah. But they do need to reform it. I absolutely agree. There are so many people who are scamming the system. And when you say about the mental illness, now take this into consideration. So you're a bloke working on a building site, you cough up blood one night, you go to hospital, you're told you've got microvascular angina, an heart valve issue, losing your off site, and then shoot a dog.
It's all right. I hope it is a dog.
Yeah, no, it's but then literally, I can't work, full stop.
Yeah.
Where's the mental illness come into that?
It sounds like the dog wants to answer as well.
Well, I've got told no, I won't get that.
Listen, I get it. Look, it's clearly an utter minefield, and what tends to happen in these kind of cases, as you just alluded to, the people that genuinely need it, somebody like yourself, and I don't think taxpayers have a problem with help. I don't think anybody has a problem with a civilised, fair welfare system. But clearly, there are massive pockets where it's failing, which is what Rachel Reeves tomorrow is apparently going to look into. John, thank you very much indeed for that. Let me go to Chris in Bournemouth on this issue of where we need to reform the system. Chris, what do you your thoughts? Hi.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon, Chris.
My thoughts on this, Ian, is we need a politician or at least a Prime Minister that has got no yellow streak down his backbone. We need to get rid of the Human Rights Bill in this country because it works against us more than it works for us. And I can tell you honestly, Ian, because I've actually seen one of these papers.
Yep.
When you see these people coming in on these thingies and whatnot, they get taken to a registration centre, and the first thing they're given is a slip of paper that tells them what they can and cannot claim for. And it'll be quicker to tell you what they can't claim for than what they can.
Well, you can't claim for anything. You can only get given, like, a place to live, heating, possibly some medical expenses, and I think 39 quid a week.
They're given a lot more than that, Ian, you must admit.
Well, I think that's quite a lot anyway, to be given a place to live, isn't it? And food regularly, heating, absolutely fine. You haven't got to pay for any of that. You can see a doctor, you can see a dentist, you might get a mobile phone on occasions. And even if you do only get 39 quid a week, I know it's not quite as much as they give over in, I think, Germany and France, but nonetheless, you know, these figures are still big when you consider how many people we're talking about. Chris, thank you. Good call from Chris. We hit the news coming on in a second. This from Gary, who says the Labour Party had to purge itself of the hard left Corbynites to become electable. Similarly, Reform is going to have to purge itself of the hard right element within its ranks if it too is going to become electable. And that's, of course, the root cause of some of the fallout from, you know, Nigel Farage about a week ago making comments that, you know, we can't just deport a load of people. It's just not possible. That disappointed an awful lot of Reform supporters. Rupert Lowe, now suspended Rupert Lowe, had the whip taken away, has said publicly, we should be able to lose 1 million people that should not be in the system. That's at odds with Nigel Farage's position. And when we talked about this last week, we had a lot of people saying, you know, they felt conned or they felt betrayed or felt they, you know, could no longer vote Reform because it's just a bit like the Tories. And if you speak to Tories, they will say, you know, we wanted to get rid of X amount of people from the system, but we just couldn't. We couldn't do it. It wasn't physically possible. Even if Rwanda had been in place, you'd have been talking about sending 30 or 40 people every couple of weeks. Not hundreds of thousands. That was never going to happen. We're in an upside-down world. Apparently, nobody can solve this conundrum. So what reforms should there be in the benefit system? We'll have more calls on that. 0344 499 1000. Right now, let's get the latest news headlines. It's 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense, absolutely crammed with sizzling delights at this end. Labour preparing to unveil its big plan, of course, tomorrow for the overhaul of the welfare system. This news comes as it's revealed over 1 million foreign nationals are revealed to be claiming benefits, and 4 in 10 JZ workers considered quitting their job to live off government support. 4 in 10. I mean, these are huge numbers. And they're scratching their heads and going, oh, we don't know where to save money. We're a bit stuck, so maybe we'll go for the wheelchair folk. That's what's causing the problem over there at Labour HQ. What reforms should there be in the welfare system? Our lines are open on that, 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage insisting his dispute with suspended MP Rupert Lowe has not slowed down Reform UK's progress. Today he announced 29 councillors who've defected from other parties to join and stand in the May local elections. 15 Tories in that list, and there are even some Lib Dems as well. Is this game-changing or just a bit of a distraction technique? And the number of asylum seekers waiting for appeals has increased by nearly 500% in 2 years to 42,000. Slowing removals, raising taxpayer costs and delaying efforts to move migrants out of those incredibly costly hotels. More on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk, 0344 499 1000. Julie in Hertfordshire says, today I had to call a government benefit line, which I've never called in my life. And the first question I was asked before I even got through was, if your first language is English, please press 1. This is the UK government benefit line. It then went on to ask if you lived in the UK. I was astounded, and a previous caller just made a pretty similar point. If your first language is English, well, it kind of should be if you're ringing that number. Anne says, my hands and arms are all messed up and I'm on PIP. I have a joint claim of universal credit with my partner, who is also my carer and works from home, self-employed. My record is marked unable to work, and yet every 3 months I get called into a job centre to see what I've done to look for a job. You couldn't make it up. That's probably costing it, I was about to say, an arm and a leg, no pun intended. And thank you for that. Doug says these people on benefits who will be paying their additional costs for TV licence, energy costs, increased water bills, increased council tax, food price rises, etc. I mean, the miserable list of waste goes on and on and on. Is it different when you're on the inside? Every time I remember speaking to a permanent secretary at the Home Office, now gone, but and he was saying, it's a never-ending meetings all day long about immigration. It's all we do, all day long, and not just one meeting, dozens of these things taking place simultaneously. So the idea that we're not trying is not true. We're just not succeeding. It's the succeeding bit. Oliver, let's speak to Oscar Redrup, former special advisor to Boris Johnson, when Mr Johnson was a Prime Minister. I'm sure you recognise a little bit of that, Oscar, when you would meet with mates after a hard week of working with Boris and team at Number 10, and you go for a swift pint in an old country pub, and one of your mates would go, will you all sit on your bums doing nothing all day there? Because I know all your mates are Mockney Danny Dyer characters. You'd probably think that if only you knew how busy it is. Do you recognise that kind of problem that you have sometimes being able to impart what goes on behind or in the corridors of power?
Oh, completely. I mean, I remember simultaneously working at Number 10 at a time where we were dealing with the Met Police fines that were going on for Rishi and Boris. We were dealing with Sue Gray's Partygate report. We were dealing with the Ukraine-Russia war. We were dealing with the kind of, and it feels like old news now, but the cost of living crisis was finally starting to erupt. Every single day felt like a complete and utter minefield of challenges. And actually, this is the thing I think people forget sometimes about politics. Although I'm not for 1 minute advocating for sympathy for politicians, but never be so stupid as to do that. But it can be a really, really tough gig. A really tough gig.
Well, I think a few mates of mine over the years have done the kind of job that you did and other similar ones around Number 10. I remember one telling me he was in a fairly senior position with one former Prime Minister, and he said, you know, the amount of times he would leave work, you know, get halfway down the road, a phone call to go back again. Sometimes he'd get to his front door, oh, the Prime Minister wants to see you, so back he'd have to go again. I mean, that kind of stuff is sort of, you know, fairly regular, right?
Well, I absolutely. And I have to say quite specifically about Number 10, just very briefly, I sometimes think that building should be knocked down, and bear with me here. Number 10 is incredibly isolating, and I suffered from it as well, like, to be really introspective about it. You forget, because it's so huddled away. It's this weird little building, this weird little Westminster bubble world, and you feel like you're on a submarine, and you see people completely losing sense of proportion and priorities. And, you know, Joan up it, you know, down in Basildon, or, you know, Keith, you know, on Merseyside, just feel a million miles away. And I think governments of all, you know, shades and colours suffer from that. I really, really do.
Maybe Number 10 should be in a kind of big floating perspex box that sort of, like sort of David Blaine style, you know, that sort of floats around the country on a big, so everyone can see, you can see down on what's going on, and everyone can see up on what's happening. But you're right. I mean, and it doesn't take very long, does it, really, for that kind of, it's not deliberate. It's not like nobody cares, because everybody in those roles, as you know, despite stereotypes, usually cares deeply about what they're doing and works godforsaken hours, some on reasonable cash, quite a lot of people not on great money, despite having a fairly responsible position. And, you know, they all want it to succeed, but something gets lost in the sort of labyrinthine world of a very complicated system.
Absolutely. And lastly on this, the other thing that I think your viewers and listeners will be quite struck by, and maybe if they're watching me rather than listening, they may work this out, although this was a couple of years ago, so I was even younger. I was slightly horrified by how young special advisors are. I completely presumed I was going to be the youngest, and very much was not. And I think people will be quite shocked at just how young and inexperienced a lot of the special advisors who are overseeing some of the most crucial issues that affect our daily life are. I couldn't believe it. And to be frank, there were many times I thought, well, I'm not qualified for this. and I mean that kind of as a joke, but I also mean it seriously. It's quite scary.
I'm sorry to keep quoting, you know, mates of mine and all the rest of it, but another mate got given a position in a previous administration that was a new position, and so when he got there, nobody knew what the position. There was no template, so he kind of had to invent it all for himself. And he sort of sat there. He was given an office, and like 3 days later, he's in the back of a car with the Prime Minister, being zoomed around roads, and thinking, this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. There was a genuine responsibility to what he had to do, but you're right. He was young. You know, he's gone on to do great things, and but extraordinary. I mean, you can see why some people wouldn't. Maybe there's a reason there's not a lot more older people there, is because they'd be, you know, dead within about half an hour. It could literally be that, Oscar.
There's a lot of life common sense, though, and I'm always struck by it, because I always tune in a little bit before I come on, and I'm always struck by your callers, texts, emails, calls. And I really sincerely mean this. You hear common sense views that only sometimes life experience can give you, and that is so lost in some of our decision-making politics.
Well, I mean, a good example of that is this first story: more than 1 million foreigners claiming benefits, over 1 million foreign nationals in 2023. It's a £7.5 billion in universal credit. That's that specific benefit. So they could all be working, but of course they've got to rely on the top-up mechanism. Now, I don't think there's if we go back, all the prime ministers, you worked for Boris, Liz Truss, Tony Blair, David Cameron, all of those. Not if you got them all in a room, said, right, put your hands up, guys. Who likes to see a £7.5 billion universal credit bill? They'd all say, well, we don't want to see that. But of course, the system somehow allows this to happen.
Absolutely. I think there's two things going on simultaneously here. There is one, unbelievably flabby and unorganised and actually unpolitical, small p, but unpolitical system that swallows up all this madness and has people with no checks and balances and really monitoring it or really caring about it. And then the other one is a capital P problem, which is governments of all shapes and sizes don't want to confront this problem because it's difficult. It's controversial in inverted commas. It makes people squeamish and unhappy. And I think the interesting thing that's going on at the moment when we think about, the benefit system and even the welfare bill that's going, up and up and up, and the announcement that's coming from Labour tomorrow, is I think there are some things that a Labour government can get away with that the Conservative Party couldn't get away with.
100%.
And I don't think, because, the nasty party, we can't, just push it away. We'll deal with it another year. We don't want to be the horrible, bad Tories.
Yeah.
And I think, in fairness, we're seeing a Labour government who recognise that and are actually maybe willing to have the tough decisions and tough conversations about this issue.
I don't know if it was you I mentioned this to before, Oscar, but no one ever heard of a guy called Ted Short, who was the Labour Education Minister, who was taking away milk before Margaret Thatcher had ever taken away any milk. But of course, Ted Short didn't rhyme with very much, so they couldn't have and he was a bloke, and he was Labour. So no one talked about Ted Short, who was trousering milk like it was going out of fashion. Thatcher came along, carried it on, and suddenly she's the milk snatcher, taking baby from the breast of the mother. That's a great example of it, I guess.
Well, there we go. And what we see now is with the Labour Party, obviously within their backbenches, there's going to be resistance. I don't think that will really come to much. Keir Starmer now is feeling quite emboldened, I think. I think he's probably been in the role for a bit of time now. He would view he's got some wins on the foreign stage. He'd look at the abolishment of NHS England last week with Wes Streeting, and you had you had Tories openly saying, bloody hell, we should have done this. Yeah. And so I think he's feeling pretty emboldened, and it's smart politically because in some ways it's suffocating the Tories and Kemi Badenoch, who would love to be resisting a woolly, woke, everything to all people, welfare Labour Party. And Starmer, and I think Morgan McSweeney needs a lot of credit for that, who's gone in at number 10. Yes. And not giving the right that space and airtime. And it's awkward because really the Tories should have sorted out this welfare bill decades ago.
100%. And some of those damning figures I've been reading out actually happened under the last 5 years of the Conservative government, not under this one. They've kind of inherited it, and it continues to be a problem, and doubtless will also grow. I wonder whether, if Kemi Badenoch stood up and sounded robust about this, gave it a bit of sort of the Donald Trump treatment and said, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that's we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act is in the bin. We're not paying 7.5 billion in benefits. That will stop tomorrow under my watch. What's the reason, do you think, as a former advisor to a prime minister, Oscar, why can't politicians or daren't politicians like Kemi, who's in opposition, official opposition, why don't they go there? Why don't they do that? Or do they just not believe it?
I think there's a couple of things, but I think the main one, unfortunately, is often, I think politicians, and I'm not going to blame the media for this, although the media has changed over the decades, and it's just so fast moving, and actually the media does its job better and better now. Let's be right about it. But I think there's a paralysis with leaders sometimes. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to upset people. They don't want to go it alone and make the bold call on some of the most complicated and biggest issues that sometimes have really simple solutions that we're just not willing to confront. Yeah. And that being one of them that you just referenced there. So specifically with Kemi, I think there is, and I'm being generous here, but I do partly believe it. Look, it's still a long old time to the next election, and I think she's just biding her time a little bit. She's getting ducks in row, and this is me being generous, I admit. But I think it's so easy to zoom over there, zoom here, zoom everywhere, screaming and shouting. But unfortunately, no one's ready to listen to the Conservative Party yet. And I think it's sometimes quite smart and strategic to recognise that and to bide that time. But it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, because like I said, the Labour Party are parking their tanks They're
on the
parking
lawn,
their tanks on Conservative. And Wes Streeting basically overtly said this in the Commons the other day. They basically want to render the Conservative Party obsolete. They want to be able to say to voters, we can do the stuff that they didn't. Yeah, we can do some nice frilly Labour stuff as well, but we can do the ugly Conservative politics as well, and we can do it quicker and better than them. So it's leaving the Tory party in a difficult position. The one thing I would say on charisma, though, and that those leaders who can kind of have a good sense of timing and they can make those decisions, you know, you can't forget about, and it pains me to say it, but you can't forget about Nigel Farage.
Well, I was just about to come to that, but then even Mr. Farage has found himself in that sort of row back position in the last week on immigration when he was asked, you know, because Rupert Lowe very openly, rightly or wrongly, I will, you know, under my ideal world, I would deport 1 million people. They put the question to Nigel Farage. He said, oh, you can't really do that. It's not possible. And many Reform UK supporters are going, hang on a second, I thought this was the man that was going to literally make that happen. So, you know, even Farage is doing, as one of our previous commentators said, you know, almost the purge of the Corbynites, in the sense that they had to get rid of the hard left. Mr. Farage is getting rid of the hard right.
He's a really, really brutally skillful operator, Farage. I mean, Rupert Lowe's someone that a lot of people really rate and respect, and is a big beast. You know, not in the political sense, but you know, I think a lot of people are quite sick and tired of traditional politicians. But in terms of his business background, and Farage today calls the press conference, you know, nothing to see here. The train has left. The train is at the next station. Look at all these defectors we've got in terms of councillors coming over for the Conservative Party. You know, that's a really difficult watch if you're Rupert Lowe, because, you know, Farage can click his fingers. All of Westminster's media will be there, bated breath, and the show goes on.
Yeah. One of the curious ones, just a final point on this, Oscar, 15 ex-Conservatives. Most of the defections have come from those sitting as independents, but there was a Lib Dem in there as well. I'm scratching my head. I had one of their leaflets through my door, oddly, just this very morning. I had a little read of it, and then obviously it went in the only place a Lib Dem leaflet should go. But nonetheless, I'm thinking, how do you make that move from being a Lib Dem to I'm going to join Reform UK? I mean, it's fine, but I'm intrigued by the kind of process of that.
Well, Farage will probably want to push and spin that, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from politically. Yeah. Like, you want to join a winning team, right?
Yeah, I think it is probably as simple as that. Listen, Oscar, thank you for your time. Great to have you with us as ever. Oscar Redrop, former special advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. I thought that was a really interesting insight, what he said at the very beginning about working in Number 10 being a bit like a submarine where you're kind of just away from all reality. You're in sort of bunker mentality. It's like you're a kind of been put on some sort of experimental mission when you're there. And I hear that time and time again from people. No wonder they had a flipping party every couple of weeks during lockdown. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Back with more from you in a couple of moments. This is Talk.
1 in 4 young people considering quitting the workforce. Those are the ones who are actually in the workforce, by the way. Got more than 1 million young people who are not in work, not in training, not doing anything. Well, what are they living on? They shouldn't be entitled to a single penny. You're young and able-bodied. Oh, well, I've got anxiety and depression. Well, so is everybody on it's a miserable Monday morning. Who isn't feeling a bit depressed and miserable on a miserable Monday morning and it's cold and, people haven't got, much money in their pockets? Get over yourself, get to work. I've just got no time for it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
24 minutes after 2 o'clock, right here on Talk. Let's go to your calls. Lindsay is in Fife. How you doing, Lindsay?
I'm good, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I'm thinking about the kind of the PIP eligibility, and there's been a lot of talk today around kind of mental health and so on, and the increase that we're starting to see within that.
Yep.
And looking at kind of PIP, what I think they should be doing, the government, is separating the form out, because if you look at the components, you've got the care and the mobility part, which that's more aimed towards, for example, disability and long-term physical health. Mm-hmm. So when you're considering mental health, I think what they should be doing is looking at more bespoke type form for that, where they're doing the one-size-fits-all assessment. They're starting to maybe look at diagnostic interviews, psychological questionnaires and things like that, because it's quite difficult when you start to think about PIP. They're saying you have to have a condition for the last 12 months, or had it for the last 3 months, expect it to carry on for the next 9 months. So thinking about mental health, if you're then claiming for that, it's quite difficult then to anticipate that that's going to last for 9 months. So it links very in with the NHS. There need to be mechanisms there to support people with mental health to reduce those that are claiming for that aspect.
And is the system designed to be this convoluted, do you think? I mean, is it, because there's no one says it's, I mean, I know people have different experiences, but, it's clearly a fairly, it's a fog of information and confusion, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do claim PIP, and I have it for a physical disability. So I'm a full-time wheelchair user, but I also kind of work, and I found the process very easy to go through because it was quite simple when I went in for the medical assessment.
Yeah.
It was very simple when I didn't have any issues with it.
You're in a wheelchair, it's fairly obvious stuff, right? And,
yeah.
Like, so it was that kind of saw it fairly seamless.
And I've got a genetic condition as well, so it's a kind of muscle deteriorating condition. So it's quite easy to see, okay, this is long-term effects on myself. Yeah. But when it comes to things around mental health conditions, I think that's where the lines get blurred, and I think it very much aligns with the NHS. So to reduce the number of people claiming and needing that support for mental health, or even when you consider things like obesity. So if you have that impacts your day-to-day life, you could potentially claim PIP. And these are things that we need the NHS to start putting interventions in place to help people to manage their health.
Do you think it's...
manage their mental health as well.
I mean, there's a lot of focus on PIP and there's a lot of focus on, all sorts of benefits at the moment. Do you think it's abused? Because I wonder whether the government are looking... I mean, I'm sure there are some... Look, any system will be abused. We've known that since the year dot. I get that. But when I hear stories of people on PIP in particular, I would imagine you can't just walk in and say, I'm not very well, can I have some money?
No, but I do think that it is abused. I know I personally have encountered people who have went to their doctor, basically going repeatedly back and forward to their GP with complaints that are difficult to diagnose, and once they've then got a record of back and forward with these ailments, that can then be used as evidence to claim PIP. So I do think there has to be a lot more kind of scrutiny with that. I think, personally, the 12 months, I would say maybe 24 months for that condition to last before you can claim.
There it is, Lindsay. Thank you. Very thorough and experienced stuff from you. Thank you, Lindsay in Fife. Answers the irony of our current media story being a tiff between two chaps called Nigel and Rupert. Fair point. How times have changed. This is somebody used to do a routine, didn't they? But you never met cowboys called Nigel and Rupert. Which you wouldn't, would you? In the Wild West, you know, that doesn't. It's, you know, Hank and Dirk and Bud and things like that. This is Louise in Kent. How are you doing, Louise?
Oh, fine, thank you.
Good. What are your thoughts?
Yes, my thoughts are about PIP. Now, I got PIP, and I got it for mental health. I've had 40 years, but when I got it, I had to have huge amounts of backup from social workers, OTs, medical, the diagnosis, etc., etc. I then went to a tribunal in 2019 and had to fight so hard, but made the case that I wanted it in order to help me stay in work, which it did do, which was brilliant. But what I don't understand is why so many people get it now with seemingly, as I understand it, no full medical diagnosis. But also, if they now don't need, well, surely there's evidence to say they're not needing all the medical backup, because if they did, these huge numbers, the doctors would be writing all night and everybody else, so clearly they don't need it now. So I would have thought the first place you do is start and look at everybody in the last 4 years who's claimed that doesn't have any medical backup for it either.
Can you get it if it's just your word? That's my point.
Well, I think they must be. And I had heard that, but the other thing, of course, of all, is with Angela Rayner's reforms coming in, what business is going to take people on with long-term mental health problems when they can be off sick from the first day? So there's that one. They work against each other, but businesses notoriously do not want people with mental health issues. That is a major issue. Now, I was very lucky, and I'm going to flag them up now. In fact, I spoke at the National Service Directors Conference in Glasgow about how Shaw Trust helped me to get back into work. I was the face of Shaw Trust in here as an example in this area. And they had a service-level agreement with Tesco to help people with mental health people get back to work. And Tesco would work with them and Shaw Trust to help you in work. It worked brilliantly for me, and when I started work with Tesco, I wasn't capable of doing many hours, but I slowly built them up to 10. But I used to work with Tesco, so I didn't even have the confidence to be till trained for the first 3 years.
Wow.
So I was a backpacker. And actually, I got really good at it.
Yep.
Eventually, I built the confidence to be till trained, but I worked with Tesco. So if I had a day when I went in and I really didn't feel very well, it's one of those things, do I go in? Yes, I'll go in, but I worked with Tesco. So I can't work on a till today. I don't feel well enough. So they give me a job. I mean, I used to reverse shop, which is put all the stuff back that everybody didn't want, right? And then they would say to me, look, we desperately need you on a till for a bit. And I say, OK, well, look, I'll go on a till, but if I say I'm not coping, you've got to get me off. And it worked really well because I worked with them and they worked with me.
And that, you see, you can't really ask for better than that, can you, if you're able to come up with a system?
But you see, that was where Shaw Trust had a service-level agreement to Tesco to work with people on that.
Yep.
And it worked brilliantly. And I then went on and became a peer lead with the Mental Health Trust, but very badly got bullied out of that role in a mental health trust, would you believe?
Well, you can't believe that. Well, I do believe it, but you shouldn't believe that.
And then I was moved over to Lived Experience Advisor. The job collapsed in COVID.
Yeah.
And eventually I had to walk away because I was dealing with so much.
Sure.
If I'd been well enough at the time, I would have taken to a tribunal and they would have lost completely. Yeah. But it's beside the point.
Okay.
But, you know, for me, there are ways, but what I would say is those forms are incredibly difficult to fill in if you have mental health problems and you live alone.
I'm sure, I have no doubt about that. But, of course, those that aren't, you know, when you allude and others allude to fraud, I guess those that are likely to want to swing the lead and cheat the system, they don't struggle with the forms. And there's the curious irony of it as well. Louise, thank you. I have to step in because we've hit the clock. Thank you for that. More comment from you on the way. We'll have more on that immigration story as well. The backlog of rejected asylum seeking appeals, 500% up in 2 years. We'll talk to the founding chairman of Global Britain UK. I'll shine some light on those disturbing stats. And of course, your comments as well on what reforms there needs to be in the welfare or the benefits system. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 3. Malcolm says, I received PIP as I have an incurable muscle wasting disease. This severely impacts almost every area of my life. At the time of my application, the process was rigorous and required full evidence from a specialist doctor to confirm my diagnosis and a detailed professional assessment of the impact on my life. My receipt of PIP has never entitled me to any other statutory government benefits. My question is simple. What is the rationale for qualifying for a mobility vehicle on mental health grounds? I fail to understand this, says Malcolm in Hampshire. And I know that I saw a few people on social media getting very animated and saying, oh, this is the classic, have a pop at disabled people. And it's not that. It's never that, because nobody wants to have a pop at disabled people. People want to ask questions when something is being given out that shouldn't be given out. And in fact, the chief losers, if you like, are people who genuinely have claims that aren't attended to properly, or their claims are compromised because of the amount of people applying, and some of those people shouldn't be applying, and the list goes on. But the car thing, what do you have to do to qualify to get one of these cars? It is curious, because there are examples of people who seem to have got one, and nobody can quite work out why. Some people might need one. I think it comes as does it replace a benefit, as in physical money? So you could either get the money or you could get the car. And I don't know what kind of car it is. Somebody earlier on Mike's show said it's like 35,000 quid's worth of car. Really? Wow, with 35,000? That's a pretty decent jalopy, isn't it? We'll come back to that. If you've got some info for us, then I'm all ears at this at 0344 499 1000. Now, nearly 42,000 failed asylum seekers were waiting for appeal decisions at the end of last year. That's A 500% increase in 2 years. The delays are keeping over 38,000 asylum seekers in hotels, adding to the taxpayer costs and, of course, stalling Labour's migration promises. This comes as an £8 million scheme to return 200 killers, rapists and drug barons to Albania has resulted in just 8 being sent back. I never know how that happens. Do they know where the people are? Just haven't got round to doing it? I mean, how hard could that be? Let's speak to Aman Bogal, who is the founding chairman of Global Britain UK. Aman, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Good to be on the show. Thank you.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, it doesn't matter which way you look at the system or even where you stand politically. I mean, this is clearly a mess, right? And we've now got 2 governments that are giving it a go to try and sort it. And under both watches, I know the new lot have only just been in half an hour, but it seems the numbers always go up. I never see these numbers come down.
Indeed, look, Ian, I think there shouldn't be a backlog in the first place. As look, not one of these, illegal dinghy should be here in the first place. Let's be honest. The great blob that is the Home Office needs wholesale reform. It's got one big job and it's failed at that, and that is securing our borders, stopping the non-stop flow of illegal immigration, or wasting billions of taxpayer pounds on housing illegal migrants. Now, just look at the absolute pig's breakfast the Home Office has made of the £8 million UK-Albania deportation scheme, right, where just 8 out of 200 Albanian criminals have been deported from our prisons. Then let's look at these immigration tribunals. They are now notorious for granting appeals that are a joke, with some very questionable judgments, judges legislating from the bench. Who can forget the chicken nugget appeal?
You beat me to it there. I was about to bring up Nugget Gate, and you've done it for me. The chicken nugget appeal, which was the paedophile who had a right to a family life, for goodness sake. I mean, these are real stories.
Indeed, and that's what we are dealing with. Who can forget the Iraqi drug dealer who had been too westernized to be deported back to Baghdad, or the most recent case, which was outrageous. The Ghanaian fraudster who won his appeal that he lodged from Ghana.
From Ghana, that's right. Yeah.
From Ghana.
So he won the right to come back. He'd already gone.
Indeed. So, look, the answer is quite simple. I mean, I would say much like the US under President Trump, where legal border crossings have fallen by 95% in the first 2 weeks of him coming into power. Look, you break into the UK illegally, you are a criminal, and that should automatically put you on a deportation flight back to where you have broken in from. There shouldn't be a backlog, as there should be no appeal. Yet, you know what, Ian, what we're seeing is this Labour government spaffing away more taxpayer money to ramp up the legal aid for illegal migrants by a third, to a massive £61 million. And where is it all going to go? It's going to go to dinghy-chasing activist lawyers. Now, the problem is that more than a half of the rejected asylum seekers are then granted asylum at these tribunals. And you know what? Just today we have seen that massive £7.5 billion that we are spending on welfare benefits for 1 million migrants. Now, the top 3 nationalities claiming asylum are Iranian, Pakistani and Afghan. And somehow these are also the same, some of the highest per capita claimants of social welfare. Now, I would argue that the government is showing its priorities. It's ramping up legal aid to 61 million, extending the multi-million pound a day migrant hotel scam, whilst it's cutting winter fuel allowance for pensioners, going after the farmers, and making the ordinary taxpayer pay for it all.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line.
And it is, and it's that confusing. You mentioned, what is happening in America at the moment, and I keep saying this. I sound like a broken record, but when I hear people predictably on the left say, how did anybody vote for this Trump character? Well, I could tell you how. It's quite easy to see. You just cited that figure at the very beginning, and we could talk about the woke agenda and all sorts of other things, but it's that kind of, right, I'm going to do something. It's that, right?
Yes, it's basically, look, President Trump went to the American people with a very simple manifesto that he was going to come in and sort this mess out. And that's what he's getting on with doing. And that's what the American people voted for. And dare I say, that's what the British people have also voted for, or at least being presented with 5 successive Conservative manifestos to cut down migration overall and to deal with the illegal migration mess. And don't forget, we've given the French, nearly £500 million to help them maintain their own law and order on their borders. They haven't been able to do. There's only one solution to this, is literally to take out the incentive to come over to the country illegally in the first place, and that is immediate deportation to anyone who crosses the channel illegally. They come from France, that's where you send them back to. And dare I say, let's be honest, if people are lodging appeals, then obviously they're admitting to where they're from, what their nationalities are. And that should mean if they're not going to be sent back to France, then being sent back to the countries they originate from. And if those countries like Pakistan are not taking them back, well, no more visas for them.
Yeah, and it's that kind of robust approach that is missing. Although what's interesting, Aman, which we've seen recently, is that some people are sensing even Reform UK aren't being quite as robust on this as perhaps some of their supporters first thought.
Well, look, my take on this is quite simple. Look, if you believe in the rule of law, then you believe in deporting people who have no right to be here. And it's about fairness. Any legal migrant who jumps through endless hoops and pays thousands of pounds to the Home Office to be here legally, to do the right thing, to make Britain their home, every illegal migrant is a slap in the face of every legal migrant. So this is about fairness. And if you believe in the rule of law, you believe in deportations of illegal people. Now, if you do that, then whether you deport one illegal migrant a day or 1,000, it means you believe in mass deportations. So, look, this is about putting British national interest first. It's the British taxpayer who must always come first. It's a very basic fundamental of any government that should be there first, left, right and centre. So the fact that we've had successive governments fail the country at doing that, it's a real indictment of the bureaucracy that is hindering our democracy.
Indeed. Well, listen, it's been great speaking with you. Let's speak again on this as well. That's Aman Bogle, who's the founding chairman of Global Britain UK, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you on that one. I mean, he seemed to speak a lot of common sense. Is there... I was trying to think as he was talking about, if a load of people, if 2,000 people cross the channel on a boat, and you were to take those people onto another boat, and you could, kit the boat out, it'd be very nice, you'd give people a meal, you'd give them a hot drink, you'd make sure they weren't ill, you'd do all of that kind of stuff, but the boat would just simply resail back to Calais or whatever part of France. It would, I suppose, have to have a docking arrangement, wouldn't it? I was just thinking of the practicalities, because the temptation is for people to say, well, surely, if that's an illegal entry, then how do you return those boats? How would you physically do it? Because if you didn't have a place to dock, then you'd have to come back again with the 2,000 people on the boat. I'm thinking aloud. I also wonder, what's the worst that could happen then? If a government, whether it was the Conservatives, Labour or even Reform UK, if a government were to say, we are literally going to do this, we are going to, at the very least, the country of origin, as best we can identify. I know that if you got into this, people would deny their country of origin, and again, you've got to land a plane in those countries. You can't just do it without asking somebody, so you'd end up with all of that kind of nonsense as well. But what are governments scared, beyond the practicalities, what are governments scared of? Why don't they do it? Is there a sense that the world will turn on them and say, we're not trading with them? They send all their asylum seekers back. That's not the way the world is. Is it that? Is it something else? 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we've got more from you on the phones in just a moment. We've got a brand new voice of doom. Stand by for that, the political mystery voice, in just a moment. And also time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning those very, very hard to get hold of, almost impossible, Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer. Have a listen.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, on the face, it doesn't seem so, Julia. And I think when you listen to what Putin has been saying in the last few years and last few weeks, you come to that conclusion as well. And Western intelligence agencies, as I understand it, believe that Putin himself believes he can still win. And his two main aims were to subjugate Ukraine completely back into Russia and to decouple the US from Europe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
How do you sort, reform, completely rebuild the benefit system in this country? It has haunted every government pretty much since time began, whether you're the Chancellor, whether you're in charge of the Department of Work and Pensions, or ultimately the Prime Minister. Everybody has said, well, this is so... The expense of the system is so vast, and of course, most disturbingly, it is growing. And it's going to grow out of all recognition. You can almost see that between diabetes on the NHS and welfare payments, that's where all of our taxes are going to be going, almost on those two things. And one of the most disappointing parts of that statement is that you'd have thought by now, you know, if you were teaching kids in the 1950s, what will a welfare system look like just a couple of years after it had launched? What will a welfare system look like in 100 years' time or thereabouts? I think many would have said, well, it probably won't exist. It won't need to exist because everyone will be super healthy and there would be very little need for, there's no malnutrition. We'll have medicine to sort out all the wicked diseases. And in terms of work, yeah, I mean, people would only be it was never controversial to think that people wouldn't want to go to work. So you'd have the very opposite analysis in a relatively short period of time ago. And yet here we are. facing a looming bill, an ever-growing bill, and Reeves talking about slashing $6 billion of one element of the welfare system is, in all honesty, it's not going to touch the sides. It's completely replaced by the continuing growing number of people who are needing to pull on the system, whether it happens to be in the conventional way or whether it's through something else. But either way, the entirety of it has to be unsustainable. I've really not heard a politician seriously try to tackle it. I'll talk to Peter in Dorset in just 1 second. Before we do, we have a brand new voice of doom. This is the mystery voice bit with a political flavour. Who is this?
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
Who's that then? Have another listen.
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
Whatever you do not call in because there ain't no prize. But if you fancy having a crack at it, you can message in 87222. Give it a go on that. If we get a correct answer, we'll reveal all. If we get a correct answer on 87222, we'll reveal all after the news headlines. If we don't, it rolls over again to tomorrow. Here it is again.
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
Who's that then? If you think you know what to do. Back to your calls. Peter in Dorset. How you doing, Pete?
I'm very well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I have a wife who has multiple sclerosis, a lifelong condition.
Yep.
And she is on benefits. And she was told that she will not have to be seen by the benefits people until 2029 because obviously it's not even worth them bothering to waste their time when they know it's totally been recorded, and she's had it since 2005, diagnosed. Now, the situation is this. They come out with their talk about cutting disability and all the rest of it. Now, there are plenty of people in my wife's condition who have a lifelong condition, and it's totally recorded, who are now under huge mental stress because they think that they're going to have their disability benefits cut, because they may not have them cut. They are the people who should be getting disability.
100%. But there's a fear with all of this talk that it might be us.
Well, these people, these lifelong people who've got diseases for the rest of their lives are under this kind of stress. And in some cases, it's all they've got coming in, apart from, say, their pension or some other benefit.
Yeah.
And really, truthfully, the government should be coming out with an announcement at this stage that all those people who were on lifelong disabilities, who aren't even going to be called by the benefits people until 2029, should not have to worry. And first of all, that will cut out a lot of waste for the government, because they can put a line through all those lifelong people who should be getting it anyway,
100%.
and they can get chasing after all the people who are playing the system.
Yep.
And there are some rogues out there. So this is a situation. We've got, and I must tell you that I also have a grandson who has Down syndrome.
Okay.
And the parents are now having to fight for him to have disability benefit.
Wow.
People who do not understand what it is to have Down syndrome is and I would suggest, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but I would suggest that people who do not understand or do not have people in their families who have a disability, who cannot relate to the situation, and I would like to say that I bet you there are a few people in that cabinet who haven't got people who have disabilities and only know how to make sums, minus and plus, and that's bad news. Whoever's involved with disability should know what on earth they're talking about.
Indeed. And, it's fine to make an announcement that you're going to look at saving money, but it would be reasonable that the same person making that announcement should at least throw out some kind of reassurance that, clearly we're not coming after anybody who has long-term, irreversible problems or disabilities. That's a given. We will always look after you, etc. And I think most taxpayers, Peter, are happy that their money goes to people in precisely those situations. Thank you, Peter. I wish you luck. Thank you, Peter, in Dorset. Warren is in Burnley. What's your take on this, Warren? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm quite surprised, actually. Recently, unfortunately, my uncle went through a traumatic experience, having a leg removed. Yeah? Oh. Now, he's 78. and he's worked all his life, 50-odd years he worked, paid into the system, had his leg removed, he's now disabled. So what does he do? He tries to claim a bit of disability benefit.
Yeah.
What can't he have? Disability benefit. And because if you haven't been on PIP, this PIP thing that everybody talks about, if you haven't been on it before you were 65, you then can't make a claim for disability benefit or PIP thereafter. Once you start receiving your pension, you can't have it.
Is that right? So your pension replaces what you would have been entitled to. So in fact, you're down on the deal because you have the same. You might have the same money, but you have in this case one less leg.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's absolutely disabled, and yet people who are walking around with dodgy knees maybe are getting PIP. They were claiming for it prior to being 65 or 66, whatever age the pension age, and they can now get all the benefits that go with it. But somebody who's actually disabled can't if they didn't have it before they were 65. How ridiculous is that?
That is more than ridiculous. I had no idea. Now you've said it, and Warren, thank you for your call. Now you've said it, I can imagine that is the case. Thank you. We're taking all sorts of calls, all sorts of angles and nuggets of info coming out on this. Sue says TikTok and YouTube is full of influencers advising on filling out PIP forms. One woman bragged she secured both types for herself and her kids. £2,400 a month, non-means tested, tax-free, of course. She charges £250, but guarantees she will get you the award. Certain words are winners, apparently, says Sue. Thank you for that. Lots to come in the next section. We'll continue on that question. What reforms should there be to the benefit system? Amazing comments and personal stories coming in from you as well. Thank you for those. Also, the voice of doom. Will we get a winner on the voice? It's a brand new voice, mystery voice with a political angle. Who is this?
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
You see, I think that's doable. If you think you know, do not phone in. There ain't no prize, but you can message in 87222. We'll tell you more on the other side of the news at 3, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yeah, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock right here on Talk. Now, Labour preparing to unveil its plan to overhaul the welfare system. Also, there's over 1 million foreign nationals revealed to be claiming benefits. I mean, that's an extraordinary number. And we've got 4 in 10 Gen Z workers considering quitting their jobs to live off government support. I mean, you can't make these numbers up. We are talking billions of pounds here. We're asking the question, how would you reform the welfare system? We'll have more on that. Rachel Reeves speaks tomorrow on this point. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage insists his dispute with suspended MP Rupert Lowe has not slowed Reform UK's progress, announcing that 29 councillors have defected to stand for the party in May's local election. We will speak to a real-life, living, breathing Reform UK councillor in just 1 second. Looking forward to that. And here's a beauty. Shakespeare's birthplace is set to be decolonised amid claims by academics that portraying the playwright as universal genius perpetuates white European supremacy. These people are sick, by the way, that think this. I mean, genuinely, they are ill. There's something wrong with them. We'll come to that story in a few moments. Before we go any further, before the news, we had the voice of doom, of course. It was a brand new mystery voice. Let's have a little listen to the voice.
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
Can we hear it again, Amy?
So I'm trying to repair this relationship.
The question is, who is that? These are some of the guesses we had. John Knott, no. IDS, no. Rupert Lowe, no. Jacob Rees-Mogg, it is not. Michael Heseltine, no. Alan Clark, no. And Kim Dorroch, no. However, we did get a lot of true answers. David, Kevin, Charles and Paul correctly guessing. It was, I was about to say the last Labour Prime Minister, but it was the last Labour Prime Minister before Margaret Thatcher. James Callaghan was the right answer. Well done to everybody who got it correct. And you get the accolade of saying, I got it correct, because there ain't no prize. And we'll have a brand new one tomorrow. Now, Nigel Farage insists his dispute with suspended MP Rupert Lowe has not slowed down Reform UK's progress. He's announced that 29 councillors have defected to stand for the party in May's local election. A senior barrister's report on alleged bullying accusations against Mr Lowe could be released this week. Now, that's going to be really interesting. But first, let's have a little listen to Nigel Farage speaking just a few hours ago.
Has it caused some consternation? Of course it has. Any argument that seemed to happen within the family does. But I can promise you that in terms of our progress and our planning, that upset is very much at the edges.
That's the leader speaking. Let's speak to a Reform UK councillor, Jamie I knew I was going to do this. Whenever I say to somebody before we start, can I just check the pronunciation of your name? It's not even that hard to pronounce. McIvor.
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 It's the K. You did all right.
Why is there not a K in there?
McIvor. IVOR. It's all right. It's fine.
But it's MCIVOR.
I'll get over it. Don't worry.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I don't want to upset
my family might be watching. They may have an opinion.
He's just walked in, and straight away I'm questioning the credentials of his own name. Jamie McIvor is with us, Reform UK County Councillor for Ongar. Therefore, Reform. You're the first county councillor, I think of.
Yeah, I was certainly in Essex. Yeah.
Yeah.
First county councillor. Yeah.
Welcome to the boudoir.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Great to be here.
Just give us your overview then. It's been a bit of a wobbly week for Reform. I think Mr Farage would admit to that.
Do you know what? I think it's been a distraction. I'm not going to agree that it's been a wobbly week because I don't think it has been. So, I mean, I campaign all the time. I'm one of those councillors that, you know, I'm always knocking on your door. I'm a branch chairman for the Reform Party in Epping Forest, and we actually had a street stall on the weekend that this story was sort of breaking.
Yeah.
And, you know, not one person mentioned it. You know, everyone was in a queue having a picture with their Nigel Farage. We had a Nigel Farage cutout because he's a man in high demand.
Yeah.
Everyone was in a queue having pictures with it. You know, there is such excitement for the party that I just think this is a Westminster bubble story. Honestly, I really do.
Well, there is some interesting irredeemable facts here, and that is that most people, if I said to my sister, do you know who Rupert Lowe is, she would literally not. I mean, with respect to my sister, who's a lovely lady and knows a lot of stuff, she wouldn't know who Rupert Lowe was. And I think that is probably an example of why this story and I said it at the beginning, I don't think this is going to have any effect on the electoral success of reform.
I completely agree, because, you know, as Nigel said in his speech today, you know, this sort of distraction has been very much on the outskirts of the bigger picture that's taking place, which is we are fielding candidates in every single council seat where there will be an election, where, you know, cowardly councillors, frankly, haven't cancelled the elections, which is sadly the case in Essex, where I'm from. But, you know, the focus is, you know, last year Reform didn't stand council candidates in 88% of the seats that were up for election. This year, from our chairman today, every single seat will have a candidate in. The party's focus isn't on, you know, we are not the Labour and Conservative Party, and I know that I think the Westminster establishment wants us to start, you know, falling into that trap, but we're not. We're a party full of ordinary people in their communities that are standing up and saying, you know what, enough of this rubbish, I'm going to put myself on the ballot paper and start to sort my own community out, save my country from the council chamber as the first big step to get Nigel into number 10. And I think, quite frankly, everyone's been so desperate for reform to have some sort of hiccup. This is not a hiccup, and, you know, I think Nigel called it turbulence. I agree. You know, you can have a turbulent flight, but that doesn't mean say the flight was awful. You know, it's just a pocket of turbulence.
You also crossed the line, didn't you, from another party?
Yes, I was with the Conservative Party for, you know, as an activist for, you know, a decade.
So what happened? Because, you know, you're a young guy, and, you know, you've got all your hair, which is unusual in politics, which is great. What was happening in the Tory party at that time that made you think this is no longer, you know, this doesn't feel like I fit these shoes any longer?
I think, so at the time I was parliamentary candidate, and I was banging on doors in a beautiful part of Hertfordshire, Hemel Hempstead, and I was listening to what people had to say, and, you know, as a councillor I always had an opinion locally, and, you know, I was fed up with being told how to vote. You know, we had an example, I think one of the greatest examples was our local council did a ridiculous thing where they encouraged a proposal where councillors wouldn't be able to vote on planning applications in their own area, so you surrender your right to almost stop inappropriate development in your own community, and it's things like that that I just thought were very unconservative, actually. So I could see the Conservative Party cracks forming. Members of the Conservative Party were so fed up with what was going on in Parliament, in Westminster, and ultimately, when you look at the country and the state we're in now, you know, it is the Conservative government that has left us in this mess, whether that's how woke we are, whether that's how uncontrolled our borders are, whether that's the state of the NHS. There's some amazing hard-working people in the NHS, but some fundamental failings, and the NHS would be first to admit that. So I just think I looked at the state of the country, but the one thing that made me go to reform, why did I go to reform? I believe in Nigel Farage. I'm a pedigree reformer in the sense that I campaigned to leave the European Union actively in my community at the time. It's the first thing I ever voted for. But more importantly, Nigel loves this country. He cares about this country so much, and he's a genuine patriot. And that's just something that I just think you don't see in the Conservative Party, sadly, anymore. It was once the party that stood for all of that. And I remember putting the Union flag and the England flag on one of my Conservative leaflets and being told, oh, you come across a little bit far right there. And I thought, you know, enough is enough of this.
Or putting a flipping flag on a leaflet.
And this is the sort of pettiness that you were getting to. But I think, you know, knocking on doors during that general election, hearing why people wanted to vote reform, I couldn't disagree with them. You know, anyone that's campaigned with me now, I'm quite good at converting people. I enjoy it, actually. I'm a bit of a salesman. I love it. But it was actually really hard. In fact, it was impossible to argue with working class people and say that we've done a really good job for you, because in government they hadn't.
And it's funny, you touched on, you know, a lot of, I'm not going to let Labour off the hook, because many of the big problems are now getting bigger again. However, they've been there for half an hour. The Tories were there for 14 years. We were talking and have been throughout the course of the show, Jamie, about the cost of foreign benefits, which excludes the big 7.5 billion of foreign nationals claiming benefits, excludes a further 5.4 billion for accommodating and supporting a backlog of more than 100,000 asylum seekers. Now, that cost rose fivefold in 5 years under the Conservative Party.
Yes.
So this, even Keir Starmer could go, actually, this didn't even happen on our watch.
Well, I think the modern Tory party in government turned into being the Tony Blair enablers, because what they did was all these things that happened under the Blair government and then the Labour governments that followed, the Tory party came in with whopping majority, could have turned the country around. In fact, that's, I believe, why the Brexit party kind of got out of the way, A, to get Brexit done, but also to stop a ridiculous socialist government coming in. But we ended up with, I think, a government that was so unconservative that that enabled all these things to happen. And the topic you've just mentioned is just one of many things that were allowed to happen. And where were the backbenchers standing up, saying to the Conservative government, this isn't on, you know, in my constituency, this many people are claiming this and that, blah, blah. You didn't see it because there was just no appetite to be a Conservative Party, and anyone that stuck their head above the parapet, either in the press or in Parliament, were seen as, you know, being disorderly, and therefore had to just, you know, go along with the lines.
And we haven't really had kind of radical reform, have we? I mean, you look back at the time of Thatcher, whether people were alive or not, everybody is well aware of the story and what happened. She was a, you know, if you like, a punk of politics, in that she absolutely recalibrated the entire system of how we do business, personal responsibility, having a share in the state, you know, owning your own place, even owning shares in the place you work, being able to be, wasn't just for the rich old duffers, this was for everybody. And I know there's lots of critics of that, it can't work for everybody, but, you know, the fact is, seismic change. And since then, I know Blair had seismic change, but Blair's was almost internal within his party. We've had a sort of, all the governments since then have been almost like a series of managers. You look at Cameron and Osborne. Cameron was, you know, if you look back at YouTube, some of Cameron's speeches, very slick, you know, fairly affable chap, but very much down the middle, very kind of management school, quite relaxed about immigration, very pro the EU, keeping to the same almost groupthink mentality of Western leaders.
Well, they all have these special advisors that tell them what to say, but I just don't think they believe what they're actually saying. You know, they give you all the sound bites, but I think this is why the Reform Party is different, because we're not a party that says we're going to back small business. We're a party that puts small business owners on the ballot paper, that stand up for their communities. And, you know, if you think about it logically, you know, the Conservative Party that most people joined when they joined it because they thought it was a Conservative Party, at the end of their tenure in government, at the start of a Labour government, you should be saying, my God, I want that old government back, because as a small business owner, things are far worse for me now. But actually, things have been a nightmare for so many years, and they can play on COVID, they can play on the war in Ukraine, they can play on all these different things. The fundamental issue was the previous Conservative government did not believe in Conservative values. It did not stand up for the small business owners, the white van drivers, the self-employed electricians, or, you know, someone below the sisters, the self-employed hairdressers and lash technicians, all these entrepreneurial people in our country. They didn't back them. But now we've got the Reform Party, which is saying to these people, and it's so easy to campaign for the Reform Party, because before you even start your elevator pitch on the doorstep, people are saying, I'm already a member, or don't worry, we've got you all.
They know roughly what
they know what we believe in. And actually, one thing that parties can debate all the time about policy, but the fundamental pillars and principles have to be there. And with the Reform Party, you have a patriotic party that loves this country, wants to control its borders, wants to stand up for small business owners, but more importantly, reward people that work hard. Working hard doesn't need to be an entrepreneur. Working hard can be, you can be in our NHS, you can be working in a school. People that get up in the morning, go to work, serve whatever business or organisation they work in, come home, and be able to afford to pay your bills, be able to treat yourself to a holiday, drive a nice car if that's what you want, and have disposable income. And have disposable income because you're not taxed through the roof. And sadly, we've had the highest tax burden for generations, and we've now got a government that wants to make that even harder for people. Frankly, you can't tell the difference between the previous government and the current government.
Well, it's funny you say that, because last week, just to go back to where we began as to whether there's been a bit of turbulence in Reform UK or whether it's something more than that, there were people, I mean, I saw them on social media, we debated it, there were a contingent of people, I'm sure small in number, who said, hang on a second, you know, Nigel Farage was interviewed about immigration, for example. Rupert Lowe said, you know, deport 1 million people. Nigel said, you can't do that. And there were some people very disappointed about that. I mean, that's really one of, I mean, there's several splinters to this row, and it also predates just that argument, as I'm sure you're aware. But it was fairly central to many people. They felt like, you know, a little bit like when they discovered that Boris wasn't very good.
I think
there's that sense of, oh, hang on a second, I feel I've been a bit conned here.
But I think you've answered your own question. It was on social media. And then when you go and speak to people out in the country, when you go and knock on doors in, you know, take Ongar, where I'm a councillor, you know, what happens on the social media world, the Westminster world, people don't care. What they care about is their lives now.
But they care about deportations.
They do.
For people who shouldn't be here.
People care about a fair immigration system. That's what people care about. Ultimately here it's about fairness.
But Nigel appears to have changed his tune. That was what has happened.
I don't know any other politician that's been more consistent with his views on immigration than Nigel Farage, who has said we have to, number one, control this country's borders. I mean, for goodness sake, we're an island. We're an island. We should be able to control our borders.
But implicit within that was that there would be, you know, a mass deportation of all the people who came over in boats, all the tens of thousands in hotels. Every one of them, politely and in a very civilised way, would have been returned to their country of origin with a cup of tea and, like, nice try, but sorry, we don't roll like this. Now Nigel's going, well, actually, like, quite a lot of them could probably stay. That's a different Nigel
I don't agree with that analysis, I'm sorry. The chairman of our party has made it so clear, Zia Youssef, our excellent chairman, has made it very, very clear on day one of a Nigel Farage government, there will be an order made to use of the Navy to control this country's borders. The British people are fed up with our borders not being controlled. And that's the first thing that will happen. When the borders are controlled, we'll deal with whatever, you know, don't forget, we're talking a few years' time here. We don't know what the state of our country is going to be with regards to who's here. But the most important thing is controlling the country's borders. That is what a reform government will deliver. That is what the Conservatives have failed to do. And Labour, let's be real, they'll say what they need to say so the MP for Dover gets to put something in his leaflets. But the reality is, Labour don't want to control our borders. They're not interested. The membership of the party,
in their DNA,
they do not care. They will say what they need to say so that people in the Red Wall might give them less of a hard time on the doorstep. The truth of the matter is, no Labour politician is interested in controlling the borders or even talking about it until they've got into government and they've realised quite how big the backlash is.
We had a call, it was from Gary, actually, it was a message earlier, who said when Starmer began sort of the process, he took over leading Labour, he had to get rid of all those Corbynites. Farage is doing the same with the right-wingers.
No.
He wants to get rid of the right.
I'm sorry.
Hence the immigration point, hence the lack of talking about a certain Mr Robinson, all of that. He's got to get rid of the right because he's going to govern down the middle. Nigel Farage is just Tony Blair in a tweed jacket.
I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that at all. And I'm speaking as a branch chairman that gets it in the ear from all different people and all different people's views when I have my regular meetings. But what Nigel is doing, and what everyone in Reform has made very clear, anyone that shares the values of this party, which is love for our country, is the primary value of this party, is welcome in the party. And let me tell you something, there are people in branches, we have branch meetings in Epping Forest every month, and at the end of the meeting we have a nice big social. We always do it in a small, in a pub or something, you know, we back our small businesses, we don't hire halls, and one thing we do is talk openly and discuss policy. Anyone who wants to be a member of Reform can be. All views are tolerated, but what I will say is we do not stand for racism. Some of the racism you have seen online recently towards our chairman is unacceptable, and Nigel Farage was right to call this out. And also some people that have very extreme views that frankly wouldn't have been welcome in any party. But the Reform Party is a professional party preparing for government. That starts with taking over councils in May and winning as many council seats as possible. And no one and nothing will distract the membership of this party, who are absolutely committed to delivering results on the 1st of May and then at later elections too. The membership of this party is now so significant, over 200,000 members. They are all people that love their country. And you know, this idea that we're somehow divided and Nigel wants to get certain people out of the party is just nonsense.
Let's finish on a lighter note, Jamie, because you are, I think I said at the beginning, Reform UK's first county councillor, is that right?
So, first in Essex. I think I may have been the first,
okay.
But yes, yeah.
Do you think people would have voted you had they known about your... You're probably wondering, where's he going to go with this? Your addiction to watching Emmerdale.
I can't believe you're going to out me right now on TV about this.
On the Emmerdale thing. He loves the wall pack. Jamie, like, you know, you're more happy with soapland on a farm.
To be transparent with your viewers, I represent
I thought you were going to be a trans man.
No. I represent a very rural division.
Yes.
And I have loads of farmers that call me up all the time. And obviously,
so it's research.
When I watch Emmerdale, I feel like I'm in Onga Rural. That's what it's about.
I like it. Jamie, great to see you. It's lovely to have you on. That is, I'm going to get your name right here, even though it's really easy to pronounce. Jamie McAvoy.
McIver.
McIver.
Fell at the last hurdle.
What
mate.
is? I have to say, you're McIver.
Normally,
it's
the first name irritates people, the spelling of that, and you're
Do you know
making
what?
them out.
We had a whole
the
conversation
surname.
in the office earlier about mispronouncing names.
Mm.
We literally did.
Let's get one name right. Happy St Patrick's Day to all your viewers.
Happy St Patrick's Day. Happy St Patrick's Day to Jamie McIver, Emmerdale fan, and Reform UK councillor. Good to see you, Jamie.
Fan of Towie too.
There you go. We'll speak again soon, right here on Talk.
We need to start rewarding people for shopping people. I really do, because it is stealing. It's stealing from taxpayers, but it's also crucially it's stealing from other disabled people whose benefits we could improve. I've been told to really good hand in life, and I think part of the duty, if you've got a good hand in life, is to be a net contributor to pay for people who haven't been as lucky as you. I think the government's plan for a freeze on PIP payments in terms of the amount, when inflation is quite high, I don't think that really makes much sense. Reassess everybody right now, and unless there's something really obvious why they cannot work. And let's just get these people off.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 past 3 on Talk. Joanna in Salisbury says, James McIver, both breath... So I can say... You see, Joanna's spelt his name as you would say it. It was the L, or it was an I that looks like an L. James McIver, breath of fresh air, intelligent counsellor, good sense of humour as well. Thank you, Joanna, for that. David in the Cotswolds, sorting out the illegal immigration issue is simple. You work with the French. Illegals arrive and depart in or out of France. And any illegal entry into the UK from France, you get sent to French Guiana. French Guiana isn't a country, it's a territory of France. There you can wait whilst their claim is processed jointly by both France and the UK, which will take an age, or decide to return to your country of origin. Do that for a year, no more illegals in France or the UK, says David in the Cotswold. That could well be the answer. Often the most simple answer, or the answer, is the one that's staring you right in the face. I think we've probably spent, this government, and the last one, they had 14 years at it, has probably spent millions on advisors and research and reports into how to solve this never-ending Gordian knot, as the phrase goes, of problems. Channel migrate. We can't stop some boats. Elon Musk can reverse a rocket from space back into its socket on the ground. We can do that with all manner of amazing stuff. We've got AI that can write your best man's speech at a wedding and also respond to A-level questions to the point of guaranteed success. But we can't stop a boat on the channel. That should not be beyond the wit of mankind. I know I'm repeating old stuff here, but it's a joke, right? Let's talk to Georgina down in London on the issue of reform. What are your thoughts, Georgina? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. I was listening to Mr McIver on the television, and I got to disagree with him. When Reform were giving their policies, or the policies they are giving, which isn't very many at the moment, the immigration subject was high on the agenda. Now, Rupert Lowe at that particular time was speaking on their behalf. So he was the voice of reform, and he was there with Nigel when he was saying it, and it was all go. Now, a lot of people, like myself, are very worried about the immigration. I live in London, but I've also got family in Great Dunmow, which is in the Ongar constituency. And there's a little town, less than a stone's throw from Dunmow, where there are 700 inhabitants in that town altogether. They have put, the government, 800 immigrants in, I think it's an old airbase. 800 there's more immigrants now than actual people who live in the village. So this is a real problem. Now, I'm very worried personally, because it was the immigrant policy and the stopping of the immigrants and, getting the illegal immigrants in this country back to where they came from that was the deciding thing for me to vote for them. And I'm going to the rally in Birmingham on the 28th of March. Purely because I need to know they are not nailing the hat on these policies. It's all up in the air at the moment. We don't know where we're going. They're changing their mind. And I, for one, am very worried about this. We need to know what the policy on immigration is. Because Rupert Lowe, for me, and I've always followed Nigel Farage. I think he's a great guy. And the young chap, and he is only a young chap, I've got shoes older than him, he's a young chap, and he's trying his best and speaking on behalf of them, but the policies are not nailed down. We need to know.
Yeah. It's going to be, the next year is going to be absolutely pivotal. Georgina, thank you for that. The next year is going to be really pivotal for reform, because I think after the May elections, that will throw up a result one way or another. We'll be able to see how favourable that is to reform. And of course, local elections are not always a barometer of how people will vote in a general election, but they do show a sense, and they are quite good at measuring a current mood. So that in itself will be a kind of pivotal hurdle, a sort of first base, if you like, in the new Reform UK. More councillors joining, more presence. That, of course, adds an extra momentum. And then, of course, more meat on the bones of policy as time goes on. You will find at some point, I would imagine, the Conservative Party and Reform UK joining up. All right, it can be no other way if either of those parties are looking for full-on Westminster success, i.e. running the country. It can't be any other way. Trevor says Jamie will make an excellent councillor, and I reckon he'll be a Reformer MP one day. He was brilliant as cabin crew and those who get on with them, says Trevor. I don't know whether that's an observation that Jamie used to be cabin crew, or whether it was an analogy. I don't know, but maybe he was cabin crew. This from Amanda, 16-year-olds. Yes, 16-year-olds get free mobility cars plus free driving lessons with AA or BSM. For ADHD, mutism or autism, they get the car before even taking the lesson. How do these conditions restrict mobility? And why should the taxpayer pay for all of this. So far, as a driving instructor, I've had a 16-year-old with selective mutism and a lad with ADHD stroke autism. I refuse to teach the latter any longer due to his anger management behind the wheel. Blimey. That's not a good sign when you're teaching someone to drive. Amanda, thank you very much indeed for that. Malcolm says, I received PIP as I think I read Malcolm's one. Thank you, Malcolm, for that. One from Catherine, solve the problems of funding immigration. Let's make human rights lawyers pay more tax than the rest of us. Fair's fair, in my view. Maybe it is that. Chloe in Hampshire, on PIP payments, I've seen so much misinformation online today. One being you can get PIP for not being able to speak English, or mobility just for anxiety. This is absolute rubbish, says Chloe. I was a nurse and a PIP assessor. I'm right-leaning politically. I've also have a disabled child and understand the extra costs involved. I do not want a government that persecutes the most vulnerable in society. Who'd have thought that Labour would do this? Yes, there's fraud. I saw this for myself, but the majority are honest. And I absolutely endorse that point. The majority are honest, but you only want well, there's 2 points really to this. A small minority can still be incredibly expensive to the public purse. There is that. The other element, which is not just really a welfare issue, is that many welfare claimants are legit, and I'm not talking about disability here, by the way, just to be clear, I'm talking about generally. They are legit, but they shouldn't be there in the first place, is the contention. We can argue that, you know, what a single person, mother or father, whoever it happens to be, usually the mother, is entitled to versus a person without kids. The list goes on, but that's maybe another argument, but you take the point. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000 25 to 4. And this story, it really was one of those that I read this morning and thought you kind of need to read this a second time because I must have missed some, even by today's standards, of Looney Tune nonsense that permeates this a strange place called the 21st century, where you might think, you know, imbecilic and stupidity would be kind of gone. The thing of the we'd learnt our lesson, you know, back in the old days when people made crazy decisions. We'd be in a far more civilised, sensible place. We appear to have arrived yet again in a sort of self-flagellating, hysterical world of word botherers and language police, and this is the latest example. Shakespeare's birthplace in Stratford-upon-Avon is set to be decolonised. Academics have warned that glorifying him as a universal genius could support white supremacist ideas. I mean, these people have too much time on their hands. Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust, which owns the homes and archives, will review its collection to highlight the impact of colonialism and how Shakespeare's works have shaped these narratives. Or you could just read some incredibly gifted, incredible plays and sonnets and enjoy them at that level and marvel at what was happening to this young man back then and how he was able to create such a huge impact even at the time. You could just do that, but no. Let's talk about decolonisation. Let's speak with Lionel Shriver, journalist and author. Lionel, good afternoon to you. It's always good to get your views on these things. I would imagine, unlike me perhaps, and perhaps I'm still hanging on to that bit of misplaced optimism, you probably didn't have to read this twice because you probably thought, here we go again. It's another one of those stories.
Oh, I did read it twice. For my own amusement.
That's good.
This is one of those stories that made me roll my eyes so far in the back of my head that they almost got stuck. And of course, you know, the whole purpose of this trust is to preserve properties associated with Shakespeare and his family, and obviously to promote Shakespeare. To preserve properties where tourists would come who are presumably interested in Shakespeare and perhaps might even appreciate Shakespeare. Yeah. And therefore, this is another example of an organization that has been tempted into undermining its own purpose. I mean, they're actually staging Bollywood dance workshops. Nothing against Bollywood dance workshops, of course, but it really doesn't, they don't belong in Stratford.
You wouldn't think so, no. I mean, there is such a thing as a clash of cultures, I guess. I mean, I was trying to wonder the manifestation, or in their curious sort of, I was about to say parochial world. It's not, the parochial doesn't really touch it. It is a kind of just, it's a mad world. In their mad world, they would sort of argue, I suppose, and I was trying to think of examples, that, you know, what sort of white supremacy, if that is one of the things where apparently, I don't even know what that is, by the way, but for the purpose of this
conversation. It's become so
it can be anything,
broad,
right?
That basically it just means anything to do with white people.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, shall I compare these to A Summer's Day? I was trying to think of somebody arguing. I literally had this is where it takes your mind. Somebody arguing that to have the ability to compare is in itself a white supremacist disposition, because most people were not in a position to compare anything because of their, you know, the tyranny of those around them. I mean, that sounds ridiculous what I've just said, but it's probably some things like that these people are going to advance.
Oh yes, one of the things that the study that some of these changes are based on was advocating is that Shakespeare should not be promoted as the greatest playwright who was ever born. He must be put in the context of all the other writers who are the same. Right. Which is, of course, why we care so much about Shakespeare, that he is a complete mediocrity. And I think that this does indicate, as you were suggesting, that this general woke movement is very uncomfortable with any kind of hierarchy. That is, they don't like the whole idea of excellence. Yeah. Because it's exclusionary, right? So you have to include all the people who are crap at what they do.
Yeah. That way you've covered all bases, and you can sleep at night with that nice warm feeling of the pit of your belly, knowing that you've done something amazing and wonderful for equality or some nonsense like that.
You know, I have to say one thing that was different for me reading that story. I think that this stuff is really going out of fashion. I mean, not only did I roll my eyes, but I thought, this feels really tired. I've read this stuff over and over again. It bores the pants off me.
Yep.
It's ludicrous. It is transparently ludicrous to everyone. And I think these people are actually behind the times. I think this woe is me, we're so ashamed of ourselves, Britain is so disgusting, we should all just lay down and die stuff, I think it's worn out.
Yeah.
And they're just making fools of themselves.
'Cause
So on top of the fact that they are making themselves ridiculous, and this stuff has always been ridiculous, they seem outdated.
You're right. There is a sense that there's a corner that is being turned here, and maybe it is gradual, but you're right. It does seem to be happening. And I always give this example, Lionel, when we talk about this, that whether it's kind of strange decisions in the workplace or advice on words you can't say, breastfeeding and goodness knows what. These ideas generally start with somebody surely at some point walks into a room at a conference or a meeting with their team, and an individual literally sits there in a chair like you and I are now and says, I've got a great idea. And you would think that when the idea is the very antitheses of great, in fact it's anti-intellectual and just plain stupid, somebody in the room would go, well, clearly you're bonkers, this is just nuts. But for some reason, up until, like you say, this potential of turning a corner, these things have been waved through. They've been given credibility. They've been given funding. They've been given the green light. And you kind of look at this and think, whoever came up with this idea of decolonising Shakespeare, somebody should have written back to them and just said, I'm sorry, you're an idiot. And that would be the end of the conversation.
Well, this just betrays that the vast number of those among us are incapable of independent thought. And you're quite right. I mean, you would think the emperor is blazingly naked. But no, these people are group thinkers.
Yeah.
They don't want to call attention to themselves. They will get with just about any program as long as it seems to be in their interest. They don't want to call attention to themselves or put anything at risk. It's a certain kind of person, I'm afraid, that inhabits the arts establishments as much as anything, and doesn't speak very well for the larger group of people to which I marginally belong.
Do you ever wonder, I mean, you've written a lot, whether it's books and films, whatever, do you ever think about some of the work you've done in the past, where that might, how it would be tested, let's call it that, today with publishing houses or studios?
Oh, I have no doubt that the first novel I ever published would never be published in its current form today. If nothing else, I invented my own African tribe, which is probably even worse than having a single black character that I don't have a right to create, according to the latest rules. So I think that there would have been a great objection to that, though it's a fun part of the book and very playful. But even playfulness is suspect in this gestalt. I just have a feeling we're getting past it.
Yeah, and there is that, and I don't know whether there's a, I mean, I didn't want to bring Trump into this, but kind of there is a sort of...
He's lurking in the background.
Well, yeah, there's a sort of an irredeemable reality about that, isn't there? That, there was a lot said on the campaign trail, not just from him, but from other politicians supporting him, that, this DEI stuff, all of this kind of, the language police, this stuff has got to go. It's curtailing progress, it's curtailing creativity, it's criminalising people, it's making people unemployed or unemployable. It's mad. It's a madness, a malaise that has kind of enveloped ordinary thinking and the Western world, as it were. So, yeah, I guess his era in those first months and leading up to that election perhaps does play a part in the turning of the corner, Lionel.
Oh, I think so. And in fact, if Kamala Harris had won instead, I think we'd not be having quite the same conversation.
Correct.
And I have all kinds of problems with certain things that Trump is doing, and I'm no big fan of him as a human being. But a lot of the things that he brought in right away, I thought were a breath of fresh air. I love getting rid of DEI. I love announcing that there are only two sexes.
Yeah. Controversial, huh?
Yeah. And I love the fact that he's starting to deport people again who have broken American immigration law.
Yeah.
So I think, that's a great package. And most of all, I think we have a cultural sea change, which I'm afraid the UK has not quite got with yet.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels that the UK seems to be clinging to this woke stuff, and my feeling is, they got the woke stuff from the US to begin with. Why can't they imitate the US when America does something right?
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on. It is still there. I saw a post a little earlier. Somebody had written to a well-known gymnasium chain and asked what their policy was on changing rooms, who is allowed to change in the female rooms, essentially. And their response was, people can identify, they can change in the room whatever they want to, however they choose. It almost took it further than some of this night. They weren't even saying trans women. They were literally saying, however you want to identify is fine by us. I mean, completely disregarding the obvious dangers of that, let alone the stupidity of it. So there are some still digging their heels in, but there is maybe a scintilla of hope in all of this, Lionel.
Yes, I think that we should look on the bright side on this stuff, because we've been looking on the dark side of it for at least 10 years, and it's been exhausting. It's been depressing. It's been really despairing for anyone with a little bit of common sense and some pride in their own culture.
Yeah.
I really yearn to see the back of it, and I think that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and the more we announce this stuff is over, the more it will be over, in fact.
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do is just make fun of these people.
I think, yeah, you are spot on. I mean, I look forward to the time where we don't have to speak, Lionel, on this particular part. I want to speak about books and stuff you're writing and thinking, rather than, having to keep delving down into this crazy cul-de-sac of nonsense and doom. But we will watch with interest. But as I think you rightly identify, the journey has begun, and we're grateful that you're on with us, Lionel. Thank you for your time. Lionel Shriver, the journalist and author. She, of course, famously wrote We Need to Talk About Kevin. Brilliant film. If you've never seen it, watch it or read the book. Thank you to her. She speaks common sense. Great to have her on the show. More coming from you next on Talk.
I was really struck by your conversation immediately before the break with Ben from Lincolnshire, who said at one stage, this is, I think, not recent, he was getting £3,000 a month. And he said that was £1,000 more from various sorts of benefit than he would get if he worked. He didn't want it, quite rightly. He wanted to work because it gave dignity. But if you have a benefit system that encourages people to remain dependent on the state when they could work, that's a bad system.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
0344 499 1000. Somebody has its attendance allowance, not PIP, after retirement age. This was reference a caller earlier that said you can't get PIP after retirement. Well, you can't get PIP if you're getting state pension, I think was the point, because the state pension is your, even though it's not the same thing because you've actually paid specifically for your state pension. This is Janice down in Clacton-on-Sea, the home of Nigel Farage. Janice, good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us.
His home. When he first came into power, I phoned him quite a lot and said I would be there to, you know, be a volunteer.
Yeah.
Nothing. Anyway.
Well, we'll see. Maybe next time your services will be utilised. What are you making of the benefits system, Janice?
I'll give up on that one.
All right, OK, fair enough.
Right. I would like to say I was shocked when I heard how much PIP people get. I've got a few people here, and I'm a pensioner. I get just over 200 odd quid a week.
Yep.
I didn't even realise they get 180 odd. That's without their sick benefit, their rent, and their community charge. I feel insulted because I've worked all my life since the age of 14.
But does it? If you're claiming PIP, there's clearly a health issue, right, that you haven't got.
PIP, I'm too old. They don't do PIP. Not when you get pension age.
OK.
You don't get PIP.
All right, so that's not even available to you.
No, it's not. I could get attendance allowance, but I'd have to be stuck in my bed, need someone to come and turn me over, then get me to the toilet, and if I'm lucky, I'll get 80 odd quid a week.
OK.
I got multiple of problems, health problems, but I am absolutely shocked by what they're getting.
But when you say they're getting, does it not? Janice, does it not?
Friends
OK.
that just go out and spend like no tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They do. You say vodka,
OK.
And I can't do that.
You say, Janice, that it's you're surprised at what they get. Would it be fair to say that there's no one-size-fits-all answer here? Because lots of people on PIP say they don't get very much at all compared to somebody else on PIP. So it's not everybody is like having it off royally here, right?
No, but it is two-tier. But I do know some people that have boasted. What I find is no one tells me, apart from one woman, has ever told me what they get on PIP. The others just go shopping like no tomorrow. And I'm sitting here going, I can't even buy a few bits of meat. I'm struggling to feed me. I can't heat my house. And they're getting 180 quid a week. I am.
Well, that should be an argument. That should be an argument to attend to your pension rather than take away from those, unless, of course, they're claiming something that shouldn't be claimed. And I get that. Listen, Janice, thank you very much indeed. I mean, here's one from Julia who says, my ex-partner is guilty of playing the system. Her youngest son has autism and receives PIP, also universal credit. She claims universal credit and gets a carer's allowance on top of that. They also get their rent paid. Her eldest son works and lives in the house and pays her £100 per weekend for board. She pockets the lot, over £2,000 a month, and pays her son just 40 quid a week from his benefits. Scandalous. says Richard. That's crazy. I mean, that came... It says here, hi, Julia. I don't know why, but I take the point. Richard, thank you very much. This one from Busybird. So if they make it harder to get enhanced for both on PIP, will you only get it if you can't move from your chair as you're dead? Don't people realise how hard it is to get enhanced now? And I think that's a fair point. And it is worth pointing out that most people who get PIP get it for good reason. I don't think any of us have a problem with that. It's the focus is not just on this one benefit. There are so many tentacles to the arguments around benefits and welfare. PIP is just one part, and of course it's a crucial part, bearing in mind that, you know, this is for severely disabled people or somebody who is, you know, clearly in need because they've got no other way of dealing things other than without some financial assistance. That is pretty much it from...
No, it's not fair. Don't go. Stay.
That sounded very Shakespearean.
Welcome to St Paddy's Day.
It is.
It's also a Geordie bank holiday after the amazing result yesterday at Wembley. Newcastle winning their first trophy for 73 years.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's the one trophy that nobody can even pronounce.
All right, don't start. Come on.
The Caribou
Sounding
Cup.
like a Sunderland bitter...
A caribou?
No, it's a bag of sweets. It's so we've got St Paddy's Day. Yep. Newcastle, everybody's been... And it's great. It's a happy Monday. But everybody seems a bit flat. Why is everybody flat?
And Jack Draper won the tennis.
Yes, and I went to Cheltenham and got completely trolleyed.
You got trolleyed?
I don't know how.
Did you see Danny Dyer there?
I didn't see Danny Dyer, but I did hang out with royalty.
Okay, can you say which?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But yeah, it was good. Oh, sorry, that was my phone. Turn your phone off when you're in the studio. That's
what they tell us.
How are you? That was the wife. Oh, she's just sending you a message. What's she saying?
Another one coming through here.
Hold on a second. The kids can hear you. They're shouting "Daddy."
Oh, that's
to
right.
Ian Collins. The kids can hear you. Hello. Say hello, Iris.
Yeah, Iris. Hi, Iris. How you doing?
Your dad can't even say hello, Ollie Bolly. They're great. They're great. My kids are amazing. Anyway, that's your mother's friend, Ian. Kids. That's all I'm saying.
Hi. What's going on? What's going on after 4 o'clock?
What is going? I don't know. Do you know I have this stuff the whole time in my head? I always try and work out.
Yeah.
We've got the Labour revolt over welfare cuts. We've got. I love the fact that 25% of the youth of today don't